What if your quiet twin sister was bullied every day, but the other one never said a word? The question hung in the air like an unspoken challenge, one that no one could answer, at least not yet. The sun was setting behind the high school, casting long shadows on the worn-out concrete playground. A few students were scattered around, laughing, talking, some texting, others just enjoying the last moments of the day before they would all scatter in different directions. But amid all the noise, there was one girl who stood out. She was invisible, and yet, everyone knew her name, Emma. Emma had always been the quiet twin. The one who didn't speak unless spoken to. The one who blended into the background, like a wallflower at a party no one noticed, no one cared about. Her twin sister, Ella, was her complete opposite. Ella was the loud one, the one who everyone gravitated toward. With her infectious laugh, her endless energy, and her fierce loyalty, Ella was a force of nature. Together, they made an inseparable pair, at least, that's what everyone thought. But while Ella's strength shielded her sister, it couldn't protect Emma from the cruel reality of high school. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from, the voice on the video called out, but Emma wasn't watching any video right now. She was lost in her thoughts, her usual sanctuary from the outside world. But today, something was different. Something in the air had shifted. Across the courtyard, Emma saw a group of her classmates gathered, laughing, whispering, and pointing. She tried to look away, but her eyes were drawn to them, drawn to their mocking gestures. She knew they were talking about her. She could feel the weight of their stares, the venom behind their whispered words. "Do you think she even realizes how weird she looks?" one of them snickered. Emma flinched. The words, though not loud enough for anyone else to hear, cut through her like a knife. She had heard them all before. The whispers. The teasing. The way they made her feel so small, so insignificant. But no one ever noticed. Not even Ella, who was always by her side, making sure to shield Emma from the worst of it. But today, something was different. Emma stood up, clutching her books to her chest like a shield, and began walking away. Her feet carried her automatically, mindlessly. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she needed to get away. The feeling of being suffocated by the world around her was overwhelming. Her heart raced as she tried to escape the buzzing noise of the crowd, but the whispers followed her, echoing in her ears. As she walked further into the empty halls of the school, Emma's mind raced. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The bullying. The isolation. The constant feeling of being invisible, not in the way her sister was, but in a way that made her feel like she was barely human. "Why does it always have to be like this?" she muttered to herself, the words barely audible. It wasn't that Emma was weak. No, far from it. She had her moments when she stood tall and spoke up. But those moments were fleeting, and every time she found herself standing up for herself, the world seemed to push her back down, telling her that she didn't belong. She didn't fit in. She wasn't like everyone else. And the one person who could have helped her, the one person who should have been there, was always just out of reach. Ella. Ella, who was always too busy being everyone's hero, the one who was never shy to speak up, never afraid to defend the underdog. She loved her sister more than anything in the world, but Ella didn't know what it was like to be the quiet one, the one who never spoke, the one who always faded into the background. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned around quickly, only to find Ella standing there, her brow furrowed with concern. "Em, where are you going?" Ella asked, her voice full of worry. She was always the protective one, the one who looked out for Emma, even when Emma didn't want to be looked after. Emma gave her a weak smile. "I was just going for a walk. You know, clear my head." Ella stepped closer, sensing something was off. "Is something wrong? You seem off today. More than usual." Emma hesitated. She didn't want to worry Ella. Ella had enough on her plate, trying to juggle her social life, her studies, and everything else. The last thing Emma wanted was to burden her twin with her problems. So, she shrugged and forced a smile. "It's nothing, really. Just a rough day," Emma said, her voice betraying her. Ella narrowed her eyes, unconvinced. "If it's nothing, why do you look like you've seen a ghost? You can talk to me, you know that, right?" Emma bit her lip, looking down at her shoes. "I know. I don't want to drag you into it. It's just, high school stuff." Ella reached out and gently lifted Emma's chin, making her look up. You're my twin. There's nothing that can drag me into it. We're in this together. You know that." For a moment, Emma's heart softened. She wanted so badly to tell Ella everything, the bullying, the whispers, the pain of feeling invisible. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded and gave a small, reassuring smile. "I know, Ella. I'll be okay. I just need some time alone." Ella didn't push further, but she didn't leave either. Instead, she stood beside Emma, silently supporting her, offering the quiet comfort of her presence. They stood there for a while, side by side, the sound of the bustling school slowly fading into the background. And for that brief moment, Emma felt like she wasn't alone. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma and Ella had always been inseparable. They were born only minutes apart, but the difference between them seemed to extend far beyond mere moments. From the outside, they looked like two halves of the same whole. Same blonde hair, same green eyes, same height, same smile, but the way they navigated the world could not have been more different. Ella had always been the one who filled the room. She was loud, expressive, and her energy was contagious. From the moment she could walk, she was the one who ran toward adventure, who made friends easily, who spoke up for others, and who never hesitated to take charge. If someone needed help, Ella was the first to step forward. Her natural confidence made her a leader, a protector, someone you could rely on without question. Emma, on the other hand, had always been quieter. Her personality was more subdued, her thoughts more introspective. Where Ella was bold, Emma was cautious. Where Ella sought the spotlight, Emma shied away from it. As children, their differences were always apparent. Ella would be out with a group of friends, playing games or organizing adventures, while Emma would be content sitting quietly in the corner, lost in a book or drawing in her sketchpad. Their parents, kind, loving, but often busy with work, never thought much of the differences between them. To them, both girls were unique, each with their own strengths. But while Emma was often left to her own devices, Ella was always there to cheer her on, always making sure that Emma was okay, that she wasn't forgotten in the background. Ella would defend her sister if anyone ever made her feel less than, which, to Emma's surprise, happened more often than she would have liked to admit. Growing up, there had always been a protective layer between Emma and the rest of the world. Ella would make sure no one ever messed with her, no one ever teased Emma. But as they got older, that layer began to feel thinner. The school years brought new challenges. High school, a place where popularity and fitting in seemed to matter more than anything. And that's where Emma started to slip through the cracks. Emma could remember it like it was yesterday, walking through the crowded halls of their new high school, the weight of the stairs and whispers pressing on her chest like a heavy stone. She had hoped that high school would be different, that maybe she would find a group of friends who understood her, who didn't mind her quiet nature. But the whispers started soon enough, and before long, Emma became just another target in the cruel game of high school hierarchy. At first, it was subtle, a glance here, a laugh there. The teasing was light, almost playful, but Emma could feel it. She could feel how people would talk over her, ignore her, or look past her as if she were invisible. Ella, of course, noticed right away. She didn't take kindly to anyone making Emma feel small, and she would jump to her sister's defense without hesitation. But as the bullying continued, Ella started to feel like she was losing control. Emma didn't want to fight back, didn't want to make a scene. She just wanted the whole thing to stop. But stopping it wasn't so simple. Ella had tried everything, confronting the bullies, speaking to teachers, warning anyone who dared to harm her sister. But Emma didn't want her to do that. She didn't want the spotlight to turn on her, to make the problem even bigger. Emma's mind told her that if she just kept her head down, kept quiet, maybe it would all blow over. Maybe, if she could be invisible enough, the teasing would stop. But as the months went by, it only got worse. Emma's quiet nature was the perfect target. It wasn't just the teasing anymore. It was the whispers behind her back. The comments about her clothes, the jokes about how she never said anything in class, the snide remarks when she sat alone during lunch. The other students seemed to find amusement in her discomfort, in her unwillingness to stand up for herself. They saw her as weak, an easy target, and Emma didn't know how to fight back. It wasn't just the kids at school. It was the feeling that even the adults around her didn't quite understand her. The teachers, well-meaning but often too caught up in their own worlds, would ask her how she was doing, but Emma always gave the same answer, fine. They never pushed, never questioned further. Maybe they didn't want to see the pain in her eyes. Maybe they thought it was just part of growing up. But Emma was starting to believe that her quietness was a flaw, something that made her less important, less worthy of attention. Ella noticed, of course. She noticed everything. Emma could never hide anything from her twin. They had shared a bond from the moment they were born, a connection that went beyond words. Ella could read Emma's silences the way others read books, and for weeks now, Ella had sensed that something was wrong. She had seen the way Emma had been pulling away, the way she stopped talking to their parents, the way she no longer found comfort in the little things they used to do together. But Ella didn't know how to fix it. She had tried to protect Emma for years, tried to fight her battles, but Emma had always pushed her away. Ella had tried to make Emma stand up for herself, but Emma would just retreat further into herself. It was like there was a wall between them, one that Ella couldn't break through. And yet, despite all the struggles, despite all the distance Emma had created, Ella never stopped trying. She would keep fighting for her twin, keep offering her support, no matter how many times Emma told her she didn't need it. Ella's love for Emma was unwavering, even if Emma herself didn't fully understand it. As the weeks went by, Emma's resolve started to crack. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't pretend that everything was fine, couldn't ignore the voices inside her head telling her that she was worthless. But Ella was still there, always watching, always ready to help, if Emma would only let her. But Emma wasn't ready yet. She didn't know how to ask for help. She didn't know how to stand up for herself. She didn't know if she could. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Emma. The teasing at school became more relentless, and despite Ella's best efforts to intervene, it felt like nothing changed. The halls that used to feel like a place of potential adventure now felt like a prison. Emma's steps grew heavier each day as she entered the building, the sounds of laughter and gossip piercing her ears like sharp needles. It wasn't that she wanted to be a victim, it was just that she didn't know how to stop it. The feeling of being invisible, of having everyone talk around her like she wasn't even there, was suffocating. At night, when she lay awake in her bed, her mind raced with thoughts of how to make it all go away. If she just disappeared for a while, would they leave her alone? Or would they just find someone else to target? Ella, as always, noticed the change in Emma. She had always been able to read her sister like an open book, but this time, something was different. Emma wasn't talking to her like she used to. She wasn't responding to the little jokes or the shared memories they used to laugh about. Emma was shutting down. And no matter how hard Ella tried to break through, Emma kept building walls, one brick at a time. One particular afternoon, Ella sat down beside Emma at lunch, determined to get through to her. The cafeteria was loud, buzzing with chatter and the clattering of trays, but Emma barely noticed. She picked at her food, her eyes fixed on the table. Ella watched her for a moment before speaking softly. She began, "You've been so quiet lately." It's like you're not even here anymore. Emma didn't look up. She didn't even blink. I'm here, she muttered, her voice so low that Ella had to strain to hear her. Ella sighed, her hand reaching for her sister's. Look, I know things haven't been easy for you lately, but you don't have to go through this alone. You can talk to me. You know that, right? Emma pulled her hand away gently. I don't want to talk about it. Ella's heart sank. She had never seen Emma like this before. She had always been there for her, had always been the one Emma could count on. But now, Emma was pushing her away in the most painful way possible. Please, don't shut me out. I know you're hurting. I can see it, Ella insisted, her voice cracking with frustration. Let me help. Emma finally lifted her eyes to meet Ella's. Her green eyes, once so full of warmth and curiosity, were now dull with exhaustion. You can't help me, Ella. You don't understand. Ella's chest tightened. What do you mean I don't understand? I'm your sister. I've always been there for you, always tried to protect you. Emma let out a shaky breath and shook her head. It's different now. You're not the one they're picking on. You're not the one who has to feel like I'm invisible. I'm not you, Ella. I'm just Emma. Ella froze, her heart pounding in her chest. You think you're invisible, she whispered. Emma nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes. I don't matter to anyone. Not really. Ella felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't directed at Emma. It was directed at the world, at the kids at school who had made her sister feel so small, so insignificant. She felt a sharp pang in her chest as she realized just how deeply Emma had been hurt. You matter to me, Ella said softly, reaching for Emma's hand again. This time, Emma didn't pull away. And you matter to so many other people. Don't let those assholes make you think otherwise. Emma's lip trembled, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel something other than numbness. A single tear slid down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, as if she were ashamed to show any emotion. I don't know how to make it stop, Ella, she whispered. I don't know how to make them stop. Ella's heart shattered for her twin. She couldn't imagine the pain Emma was going through, the isolation she must have felt day after day. But Ella also knew that Emma wasn't the kind of person who could fight back with words or fists. She was different, quieter. But that didn't mean she was weak. You don't have to fight them back with anger or violence, Ella said softly, her voice full of sincerity. But you do have to fight back. You have to show them that you won't let them break you. That you're stronger than they think. Emma looked at her, confusion clouding her eyes. How? Ella squeezed her sister's hand. By finding your voice. By doing what makes you feel good, even if it's just for yourself. Don't let them define who you are. You are so much more than what they say. Emma stared at Ella for a long moment, considering her words. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to believe that she wasn't worthless, that she wasn't invisible. But the hurt ran so deep. The teasing, the cruel comments, they had eaten away at her self-worth, and now, she didn't know how to rebuild it. I'll try, Emma said quietly, her voice full of uncertainty. Ella smiled, a small but genuine smile. That's all I ask. Just take it one step at a time. And I'll be right here, every step of the way. For the first time in weeks, Emma allowed herself to lean into her twin's warmth, to feel the comfort of Ella's presence. It wasn't a solution to her problems, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Days passed, and despite Emma's promise to try, the weight of the world seemed to press even harder on her chest. School felt like a battlefield, each hallway a minefield of whispered insults, laughing groups, and judgmental stares. Even though Ella stood beside her every step of the way, Emma felt the growing divide between them. Ella was strong, fearless, and outspoken, while Emma, no matter how hard she tried, was still quiet, still invisible in a sea of faces. It wasn't just the teasing anymore. The girls at school, especially a group led by Morgan, the school's most popular girl, had turned their cruelty into an art form. It started with snide comments under their breath, but now it was more calculated. They would spread rumors, leave notes in Emma's locker, and send hurtful texts when no one else was around. Each one stung, but the worst part was that Emma couldn't escape it. She couldn't even escape it at home. Ella was always there, but the situation was starting to feel more suffocating than supportive. Emma appreciated her sister's efforts, but Ella's forceful approach, always fighting back, always confronting the problem head-on, only made Emma feel weaker. Ella's constant, almost aggressive protection didn't leave Emma any space to breathe, and, truthfully, she was starting to resent it. She didn't want to be the victim, the one everyone pitied. She just wanted the pain to stop. One day, Emma walked into the classroom, her heart already sinking as she saw the familiar crowd of students gathered around their desks. She could feel the eyes on her, the unspoken judgment. As she settled into her seat, trying to blend into the background as usual, she felt her phone buzz in her pocket. It was a message from Morgan. "You should really stop showing up to class. You're a waste of space." The words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. She stared at the message, her fingers trembling as she gripped her phone. There was no escape. No relief. No way to turn the world off. Before she could think, Emma replied, typing out the words quickly, her anger flooding to the surface for the first time in a long while. "If I didn't show up, you'd just find someone else to pick on." Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. "We can't help it if you're just too easy to pick on." Emma stared at the screen, the words burning into her mind. But instead of the usual sense of shame, something else began to stir within her. It wasn't hope, it wasn't even anger. It was a sense of absolute defeat. She felt small, invisible, and utterly powerless. Before she could respond, the classroom door opened with a loud bang, interrupting her spiral. Ella stormed into the room, her fiery eyes scanning the room until they landed on Emma. She had a look on her face, a look that said she knew exactly what had been happening, and she wasn't going to stand for it anymore. "Who's texting my sister?" Ella's voice rang out, bold and sharp, cutting through the murmur of the classroom. Emma winced at the sound, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward them. "No one," Emma whispered, trying to shrink further into her seat. Ella didn't seem to hear her. She walked right up to Morgan, who was sitting at the back of the class with her usual gaggle of friends. "Is this your idea of a joke?" Ella's tone was low, but there was an undeniable threat in it. Morgan raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about?" Ella's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb. I know you've been sending my sister those messages. I'm not going to let you get away with it." The whole class seemed to hold its breath as the tension mounted. Emma sat frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to crawl under her desk and disappear, to not be the center of this confrontation. She didn't want Ella to fight her battles anymore. She didn't want to be exposed. But it was too late. "You know, Ella," Morgan said with a smirk, "your sister really needs to get over herself. No one cares about her, and if she wasn't so weird, maybe she'd actually fit in." Ella's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare talk about her like that," she hissed. "You think this is funny? You think you can break her? You have no idea who you're messing with." Emma's chest tightened as the classroom seemed to close in on her. She could feel her face burning with embarrassment, the attention on her, all the eyes now focused on the drama unfolding. Ella's voice continued to rise, but Emma's focus began to drift. She felt like she was drowning in it all, the hurt, the frustration, the guilt of not being able to stand up for herself. The suffocating weight of her fear seemed to settle deeper within her. Finally, Emma couldn't take it anymore. With one final, shaky breath, she stood up, grabbing her books and walking out of the classroom without a word. Ella didn't chase her, didn't call out her name. She knew, she understood. Emma needed to be alone, needed to process everything in her own way, even if it meant running away from the confrontation that had spiraled out of control. Emma found herself in the empty school hallway, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. Her mind was racing, her thoughts jumbled and frantic. She didn't know what to feel, only that the walls around her were closing in, pressing tighter and tighter, suffocating her. She sat down against the lockers, hugging her knees to her chest, fighting back the tears that were threatening to spill over. She hated herself for feeling so weak. She hated that she couldn't be like Ella, couldn't fight back, couldn't make the pain go away. And for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to cry. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, but Emma couldn't bring herself to move. She sat on the cold, hard floor of the empty hallway, her back pressed against the lockers. The noise of the school day continued in the distance, but to Emma, it felt like the world was muffled, like she was trapped in a bubble of her own despair. Her thoughts swirled in a haze of frustration, hurt, and confusion. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to leave the pain behind, to escape everything. But as she sat there, trying to make sense of the emotions she couldn't control, something in her began to stir. A small voice inside, buried beneath the weight of everything, whispered, "You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to keep running away." The words were so quiet, so gentle, but they resonated in Emma's chest like a sudden spark of light in the dark. She didn't know if she believed it yet, but the thought was there, and it was enough to pull her attention away from the suffocating loneliness that had been consuming her. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, pulling Emma out of her reverie. She glanced up, her heart catching in her throat. It was Ella, standing there at the end of the hall, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had likely been searching for Emma after the scene in the classroom. The concern in Ella's eyes was evident, but Emma could see something else too, something deeper, something like a mixture of worry and frustration. "Emma," Ella said softly, taking slow steps toward her. Her voice was laced with an unspoken plea. "Are you okay?" Emma wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed that she'd been caught in such a vulnerable moment. She didn't want Ella to see her like this, not broken, not so small. But she couldn't hide it anymore. "I'm fine," Emma muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood up quickly, brushing off the dust from her jeans as though it would somehow make her feel less exposed. Ella stood in front of her, not buying the act for a second. "No, you're not," she said, her voice firm but soft. "You've been carrying this all on your own, haven't you?" Emma swallowed, not knowing how to respond. The lump in her throat felt like it was choking her. Ella's gaze softened, but she didn't step back. She was right. Emma had been carrying it alone. She had built walls around herself, locked away the pain, and kept it all inside, because it seemed safer than admitting how badly it hurt. But now, Ella was here, and Emma realized that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as unbearable as she had thought. "I don't know how to fix it, Ella," Emma whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to make it stop." Ella's expression softened even further. "You don't have to fix it all at once. But you can start by letting me help." Emma shook her head, her thoughts racing. "I don't want you to keep fighting my battles for me. I don't want to be the person you have to protect. I just want it to be over. I want to disappear." Ella's heart ached as she reached for Emma's hand. "You're not invisible, Em," she said softly, her voice full of conviction. "You may feel like it, but I see you. And I'll always see you. You don't have to disappear. You just need to find a way to stand up again." Emma's eyes welled up with tears, and for a moment, she thought she might break completely. But Ella's words, so simple and steady, gave her a glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. She could stand up again. She could fight back, not with anger or violence, but with strength. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one step at a time. The idea was both terrifying and comforting at the same time. I'm so tired of feeling weak, Emma admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can do it. Ella squeezed her hand gently, her thumb brushing over the back of Emma's hand in a soothing motion. You are not weak, she said with a certainty that made Emma believe it, even if just for a moment. You've been carrying so much, and you're still standing. That takes more strength than you know. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Emma let out a shaky breath, looking up at her sister. For the first time in what felt like ages, she didn't feel completely alone. It was a start, a small one, but a start. Ella was there for her, even if Emma couldn't fix everything in an instant. Thank you, Emma whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you. Ella smiled, her eyes softening. You'll never have to find out, Em. We've got this. Together. The moment felt like a turning point, like the first crack in a dam that had been holding back so many emotions for so long. Emma didn't know how she would face the next day, the next week, the next year. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could find a way through it. With Ella by her side, maybe she wasn't so invisible after all. Come on, Ella said gently, pulling Emma toward the doors of the school. Let's get out of here. We'll figure it out together, okay? Emma nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Okay, she said softly. Together. And for the first time in weeks, Emma allowed herself to believe that there might be a way out of the dark. She wasn't alone. She wasn't invisible. She was stronger than she had thought. The following days passed in a blur, but something had shifted within Emma. It wasn't a sudden transformation, not like flicking a switch and suddenly everything was better. But there was a subtle change, a quiet resolve that began to take root in her heart. She wasn't going to let herself be crushed by the weight of others' words, and she wasn't going to allow the negativity around her to define who she was. It wasn't easy. The whispering still followed her, the stares still pierced her like daggers, but Emma held her head a little higher. It was like a flickering light inside her, one she was learning to trust. She didn't have to fight back in the same way Ella did. She didn't have to become someone she wasn't. But she could take control of how she responded to the world around her. It was a start. Ella noticed the difference in her sister almost immediately. Emma was quieter, still, but there was a calmness to her that hadn't been there before. She seemed less burdened, less crushed by the weight of her own thoughts. And though the teasing didn't stop, it felt like Emma was starting to take back the power she'd allowed others to steal from her. One afternoon, as the school bell rang and students poured out of the building, Ella caught up with Emma at the gate. She could see the change in her sister. Emma wasn't looking at the ground, wasn't rushing to get out of sight. She was walking slower, her shoulders no longer hunched. Hey, Ella said, falling into step beside her. You doing okay? Emma gave a small nod, a hesitant smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Yeah. I think so. Ella studied her for a moment, making sure she wasn't just putting on a brave face. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice sincere. You've been really strong lately. Emma swallowed, her heart warming at the words. Thanks, Ella. I'm trying. It was a simple conversation, but it meant more to Emma than she could put into words. Her sister wasn't just fighting for her anymore, Ella was standing beside her as an equal, as a partner in this journey. Emma realized then that she didn't have to be alone, and she didn't have to fix everything all at once. Just taking one step at a time was enough. The following week brought more challenges, as expected. Morgan and her group of friends didn't ease up on the teasing. In fact, it felt like they were trying harder to break Emma down. But something inside Emma had begun to harden. She didn't react the way she used to. She didn't cry, didn't shrink into herself, didn't try to run away. She simply held her ground, kept her composure, and walked away when the words cut too deep. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. There were still moments when Emma wanted to collapse under the pressure, when she wanted to scream or cry or just give up. But each time those moments came, Emma found herself thinking about what Ella had said, "You're stronger than you know." And slowly, those words began to mean something to her. One day, as Emma walked down the hallway toward her next class, she was surprised when Morgan stepped into her path. The tall, blonde girl blocked her way, her usual entourage flanking her on either side. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had been dreading this moment, this face-off with Morgan, but she didn't back down. Not this time. Morgan looked her up and down, her lips curled into a smirk. "What's up, loser? Still hiding behind your little sister, or did you finally learn how to stand up for yourself?" Morgan's voice was dripping with mockery, but Emma didn't flinch. She didn't feel the familiar rush of fear and shame that used to flood her chest. "I'm not hiding," Emma said, her voice steady, even if her heart was pounding in her chest. "And I'm not scared of you, Morgan." Morgan raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the calm in Emma's voice. For a moment, Emma thought she might back off, but Morgan just sneered. "Wow. Look at you, getting all tough," Morgan taunted. "You really think anyone's going to care? No one will ever see you as anything but the quiet, weird girl." Emma took a deep breath. She wasn't going to let Morgan's words get under her skin. Not anymore. "Maybe," she said, her voice quiet but resolute, "but I'm not trying to make you care. I'm trying to be okay with who I am. And if you don't like that, well, that's your problem." Morgan stared at her, clearly thrown off by Emma's calmness. The group of girls behind Morgan exchanged glances, but they didn't say anything. Finally, Morgan huffed, clearly frustrated by Emma's lack of reaction. With a toss of her hair, she stepped aside, pushing past Emma without another word. Emma exhaled deeply, her hands shaking as the adrenaline faded. She felt a small sense of victory, but more than that, she felt something even more important: she had stood up for herself. For the first time in a long time, she had faced her fears and not let them control her. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't a victim. She was Emma, and that was enough. When Ella found her later that afternoon, sitting on a bench outside, Emma's face was flushed, but there was a spark in her eyes that Ella hadn't seen in weeks. "You did it, didn't you?" Ella asked, sitting down beside her. Emma nodded slowly. "I think I did. I didn't let her get to me." Ella grinned, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Em. That was amazing." Emma smiled back, feeling something shift deep inside her. It was the first step, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to carry her through the days ahead. Emma woke up the next morning with a sense of unease in her chest. It wasn't that she was afraid of facing the day, it was more like the calm before a storm. She had stood up for herself yesterday, yes, but she knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Morgan and her group of friends didn't give up that easily. And while Emma felt a sense of pride for what she had done, the reality was that facing them again would take more than just a few quiet words. It would take resilience, something she had yet to prove to herself. As Emma made her way through the halls that morning, her thoughts raced. How was she supposed to keep going? How could she face the world when it felt like everything was stacked against her? She had started to find her voice, yes, but she still felt invisible to most people, like she was standing on the edge of something, and every time she tried to step forward, she was pulled back into the shadows. The weight of being misunderstood, being an outsider, was still there, even if she wasn't letting it control her as much. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, and Emma slid into her seat, eyes focused on her notebook. She wasn't ready to look up, to see what would come next. Not yet. The minutes stretched by, and Emma tried her best to tune out the voices around her, the laughter, the whispers, the occasional glance in her direction. She didn't want to feel self-conscious anymore, but it was hard to stop the wave of insecurity from crashing over her. As she scribbled notes on the page in front of her, her mind wandered back to the conversation with Ella last night. They had talked about how Emma was feeling, how sometimes, the pressure of it all felt like it was about to break her. Ella had said the words that Emma was still clinging to, "You're stronger than you know." But how was she supposed to believe that? How was she supposed to believe she could overcome this, when everything felt like a constant battle? It was then that the door opened with a soft creak, and Mr. Dunlap entered the room, cutting off Emma's spiraling thoughts. His usual smile was absent, and his tired eyes scanned the class. He didn't seem like his usual self today. Something was different, and it immediately caught Emma's attention. "Morning, class," he said, his voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. "Let's get started today. We've got a lot to cover." Emma looked around, sensing the tension in the air. Something was off. As the lesson went on, Emma found it harder to focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Morgan and the group. Were they planning something for today? Were they going to turn the tables on her again? She didn't have the answers, but the uncertainty was starting to gnaw at her, filling her with a sense of dread she couldn't shake. The break came like a breath of fresh air, and Emma immediately headed to the restroom to escape the looming pressure of the day. She closed the door behind her, leaning against the cool tiles for support as she closed her eyes and took in a shaky breath. The bathroom was empty, and for a moment, Emma felt like she was the only one in the entire world. It was quiet here, away from the noise, away from the people who looked at her like she didn't belong. In this small, unremarkable space, she could breathe. But it didn't last long. The sound of heels clicking against the floor broke the silence, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. She turned around to find Morgan standing in the doorway, flanked by two of her friends, each of them with a look of superiority on their faces. For a second, Emma froze. Her mind went blank, and the room seemed to close in on her. But then, she felt something stir deep inside of her, a familiar, burning desire to protect herself. To not be pushed around. Morgan's eyes gleamed with malice as she stepped into the restroom, blocking the exit. "You really thought you could get away with that little stunt in the hall yesterday," she sneered. "You think you can just stand up to me and expect everything to be fine? You're pathetic." Emma's stomach tightened, her hands growing clammy. She wanted to say something back, something strong, something that would make Morgan back off, but the words got caught in her throat. She could feel the heat rise in her cheeks, the sting of embarrassment flooding her. But as much as it hurt, as much as her fear threatened to take over, Emma didn't let herself show weakness. "Not now. You can't keep doing this," Emma said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I don't know what your problem is, but it's not my fault. I'm not the one who's been treating people like crap." Morgan's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, I'm not the one with the problem, Emma," she said with a cold laugh. "You are. You think people actually care about you? No one wants to be around someone like you." Emma's hands tightened into fists. She had heard it all before, the cruel taunts, the degrading remarks, but this time, something inside her shifted. She didn't have to let Morgan's words define her. She didn't have to cower. "You don't know me," Emma said quietly, her voice unwavering. "And frankly, I don't care what you think anymore." For a long moment, Morgan just stared at her, her face a mixture of surprise and disbelief. The tension hung thick in the air, but it was Emma who finally broke the silence. "I'm not going to stand here and let you make me feel small. Not today, not ever." Morgan's eyes narrowed, and she opened her mouth to say something else, but then she paused. For just a second, Emma saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Something that resembled doubt. But Morgan didn't say another word. Instead, she just turned on her heel and walked out, her friends following in tow. Emma stood there, motionless for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Her heart was still racing, but the fear she'd felt moments before had dissipated, replaced with something else, something stronger. It was as if she had just taken back a piece of herself she hadn't even realized she'd lost. When Emma finally left the bathroom, she was no longer the timid girl who let others dictate how she should feel. She was Emma, the one who had fought back and stood her ground. And while the road ahead would still be difficult, she was beginning to believe that she could face whatever came next. As she walked back to class, she glanced up at the sky. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The next few days felt like a strange balance between growth and uncertainty for Emma. She was still navigating the uncharted waters of self-empowerment, trying to figure out what it meant to truly stand up for herself. The confrontation with Morgan in the bathroom had left a lingering sense of quiet pride inside her, but that didn't mean everything was suddenly smooth sailing. The hallways still felt like battlegrounds, and the whispers of her classmates were like a soft but persistent hum in the background. Despite her newfound strength, Emma still felt alone. She had her sister, of course, but there were times when Ella wasn't around, and Emma was left to face the world on her own. It was hard. It was tiring. But she wasn't going to back down. She couldn't. One morning, as Emma sat down in her first class, she noticed a change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Emma's eyes caught a glance from someone sitting a few rows ahead, Tyler, one of the popular boys in school. He was leaning forward, scanning the room, and for some reason, his eyes locked onto hers. He held her gaze for a moment longer than usual, and then, without a word, he turned back around and pretended to pay attention to the board. Emma felt her heart skip in her chest. She wasn't used to attention from people like Tyler. In fact, the popular crowd had always been distant, as if there were some unspoken rule that Emma didn't fit into their world. But there was something about the way he looked at her that felt different. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't mockery. It was something else, something Emma couldn't quite name. The class went on, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about it. Why had Tyler looked at her like that? Was it a mistake? Had he just been distracted? She didn't know. But she did know one thing: she wasn't going to obsess over it. She wasn't going to let one look from someone else derail her progress. Still, it was hard not to wonder. After class, Emma headed to the hallway, ready to face whatever came next. The bell rang, and students flooded the halls, all moving in different directions. Emma was just about to turn the corner when she heard a familiar voice. "Hey, Emma." She froze, and a mix of surprise and confusion washed over her. Tyler. He was standing right in front of her, a shy smile tugging at the corners of his lips. She blinked, her mind scrambling for a response. Hey," Emma said, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. "What's up?" Tyler scratched the back of his neck, clearly nervous, and Emma could tell he wasn't used to being the one to initiate conversations like this. "I just wanted to say something," he began, looking down for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "You were really brave the other day. When you stood up to Morgan." Emma felt her stomach flip, her breath catching in her throat. Was he really talking about that? She didn't know what to say. Thanks," she managed to say, her voice uncertain. "I didn't think anyone noticed." Tyler nodded, his expression serious. "I did. And I thought it was pretty awesome. I know it's not easy to stand up to someone like her, but you did. And that's not something most people would have the guts to do." Emma blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. She had never expected Tyler, someone she always saw as part of the crowd that ignored or ridiculed her, to say something like this. Before she could respond, Tyler continued. "I've seen how they treat you, and, well, it's not right. I know I don't have much room to talk, but I just wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you're weird or whatever they say. I think you're actually pretty cool." For a moment, Emma was speechless. She didn't know how to react. This wasn't the type of conversation she had ever expected to have with someone like Tyler. But it was also exactly what she needed to hear. She had spent so much time feeling invisible, like she didn't matter. But here was someone from the group that always seemed so far out of reach, telling her that she wasn't as alone as she thought. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That means a lot." Tyler smiled, his shoulders relaxing a bit. "No problem. Just, don't let them get to you. You're better than them." Emma nodded, the weight of his words settling on her. It was the first time in a long time that someone outside of Ella had seen her for who she was, not the version others made her out to be. It felt like a small victory in itself. As Tyler turned to walk away, he glanced over his shoulder. "And hey, if you ever need someone to talk to, or if you need help with anything, I'm here." Emma didn't know what to say. Part of her was still reeling from the conversation, but another part of her felt something shift. Tyler wasn't just the guy who sat at the popular table. He wasn't just part of the crowd that always seemed to look down on people like her. He was someone who had seen her strength, and he respected it. And that meant more than Emma could ever explain. The rest of the day passed in a daze, with Emma replaying the conversation over and over in her mind. She felt a strange mix of disbelief and gratitude. Tyler's words had struck a chord deep inside her. She had spent so much time feeling like an outsider, like she didn't fit anywhere. But for the first time in a long time, she realized that maybe she didn't need to fit into anyone's box. Maybe she could carve out her own space. And as she walked home that day, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone in this battle. And maybe, just maybe, there were people out there who saw her for who she really was. After her conversation with Tyler, Emma found herself walking through the hallways with a quiet sense of confidence. The weight of Morgan's taunts didn't feel as heavy on her shoulders anymore, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't just floating through life, she was standing firm, carving out her space. Tyler had given her a glimpse of something different, that maybe she wasn't the odd one out. Maybe she wasn't as invisible as she'd thought. But as much as Emma wanted to bask in the warmth of that new sense of self, reality wasn't ready to let her off the hook so easily. When the bell rang and students filed into the next class, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. There was a tension in the air, something darker, more insidious than she had expected. As she entered the classroom, her gaze landed on Morgan, who was sitting in the back with her usual group of friends. They were laughing, talking amongst themselves, but Emma could feel their eyes flicking toward her every now and then. It was like a switch had flipped. For the first time, Emma could sense the animosity radiating from Morgan and her friends. They weren't just ignoring her anymore, they were actively watching her, waiting for her to slip up. Emma tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered like a bad omen. She sat down at her usual desk, trying to focus on the lesson. But her mind kept wandering. What was it that Morgan and her friends were planning? Was this the calm before the storm, or was she just being paranoid? The class began, but Emma's focus was shattered. Every whisper, every glance from across the room, felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. She could feel herself shrinking in on herself, despite the progress she had made. Then, without warning, Morgan stood up and walked toward the front of the class. Emma's heart skipped a beat. The entire class seemed to hold its breath, and Emma could feel every pair of eyes on her, even though no one said anything directly. It was like the tension was growing, becoming palpable. Morgan cleared her throat, catching everyone's attention. "Hey, Ms. Jensen," she said, her voice sweet and sugary, but the undertone of sarcasm was unmistakable. "I just wanted to ask if we could have a little group discussion about Emma." Emma's stomach dropped. Her mind raced. What was going on? Why was Morgan bringing her up in front of everyone? Ms. Jensen, who hadn't even glanced at Emma yet, looked up from her desk. "Group discussion," she repeated, sounding confused. "Yeah, you know," Morgan continued, her voice taking on a mock-concerned tone. "It's just that, well, we've all noticed how much Emma's been changing lately." She let the word hang in the air like it was some kind of accusation. "She's been a little more bold, a little more outspoken. It's a little out of character, don't you think? The class murmured, and Emma's face flushed with embarrassment. She couldn't believe this was happening. It felt like she was the center of a storm, and she was powerless to stop it. Morgan's gaze shifted toward Emma, her smile all sharp edges. I mean, yesterday she was so brave standing up to me. But we all know that Emma has always been the quiet one, right? The one who keeps her head down. So, maybe it's time for her to stop pretending to be someone she's not. There was a ripple of laughter from the group of girls sitting behind Morgan, and Emma's blood ran cold. She felt every single eye in the room on her. She was the target now. Emma's first instinct was to shrink back. To hide. But something inside her pushed back against that urge. She wasn't going to back down, not now. Not after everything. So, she took a deep breath and slowly stood up, meeting Morgan's gaze head-on. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not, Emma said, her voice steady, though the tightness in her chest made it hard to breathe. I'm just trying to be myself. And maybe that's hard for you to understand. But I'm not going to let you tell me who I should be. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. It felt like time had stopped. Morgan's smirk faltered, just for an instant, and Emma saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected, frustration. Morgan wasn't used to being challenged like this. She wasn't used to people standing up to her. But that flicker disappeared as quickly as it came, and Morgan's expression shifted back to one of cold amusement. Well, good for you, Emma, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But just remember, there's a cost to being yourself in this world. You can't expect things to go your way just because you're different. Emma's heart raced, but she didn't let it show. I don't expect anything, she replied, her words sharp. I'm just not going to let you push me around anymore. The tension in the room was suffocating, and for a moment, Emma wondered if Morgan was going to say something else. But instead, Morgan just smirked, giving Emma one last pointed look before she turned back to her group. Whatever, she said, clearly dismissing Emma. You can keep playing the martyr. I don't care. Emma sat down, feeling the eyes of her classmates still on her. She could hear the soft murmurs around the room, the way people whispered about what had just happened. She didn't know if they were on her side or if they were just watching for the next spectacle. But it didn't matter anymore. She had spoken up, and that was what counted. After the class ended, Emma was overwhelmed. She had stood up to Morgan, again, but it had come at a price. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and the weight of everyone's eyes on her felt unbearable. But there was no turning back now. As Emma walked through the halls, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get harder from here. The more she stood up for herself, the more people would notice, and the more they would find ways to bring her down. But she also knew something else, standing her ground was the only way forward. And no matter how hard it got, she wouldn't back down. The days after her confrontation with Morgan were nothing short of a storm. The whispers in the hallways grew louder, more frequent. It wasn't just Morgan now, there were others, too, picking up where she left off. Emma had become the target of ridicule, the girl who thought she could stand up to the queen bee. She tried to ignore it. She really did. But every glance, every laugh that seemed to be directed at her, chipped away at her resolve. At home, things were quieter. Ella, her ever-supportive twin, could sense something was off. Emma hadn't shared the details of the classroom incident, not wanting to add to the growing tension. She didn't want to seem weak, but inside, she felt like she was unraveling. One evening, while they were sitting on the couch watching TV, Emma couldn't hold it in anymore. The weight of everything, the pressure, the exhaustion, was too much. I can't do this anymore, Emma said softly, not looking her sister in the eye. Every day, it's like I'm walking on eggshells. I thought standing up to them would feel freeing, but instead, it's just made everything worse. Ella turned toward her, concern clouding her features. What do you mean? They've just been relentless, Emma continued, her voice cracking. I thought it would stop, or at least get better. But it's like Morgan has a whole army now. I don't know how much more I can take. Ella's eyes softened as she reached for Emma's hand. You're strong. You know that, right? Emma bit her lip, trying not to let the tears spill. I thought I was. But every day, it feels like I'm getting weaker. Like I'm losing myself little by little. Ella pulled Emma into a hug, and for a moment, Emma let herself collapse into her twin's arms. It was comforting, the way Ella always seemed to understand, always seemed to be there when Emma needed her most. But Emma knew the truth, she was facing this battle alone, at least in the world outside their home. Ella couldn't protect her from what was happening at school. And that was what made it so hard. The next morning, as Emma walked into school, she felt the familiar knot in her stomach tighten. It was like every student in the hallway could sense her vulnerability. She kept her head down, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, trying to make herself as small as possible. But that didn't work. Not anymore. By the time she reached her locker, she could feel someone behind her. She turned, and there was Morgan, flanked by her usual crew. There was a cruel glint in Morgan's eyes, and for the first time, Emma could see the malice behind her smile. Hey, Emma, Morgan said, her voice sickly sweet. I was just wondering, how's the standing up for yourself thing going? Still playing the hero, or have you finally realized your place yet? Emma felt her pulse quicken. She could feel the eyes of students around them, waiting for the next move. It was always like this now, like she was on display, like the moment she walked into school, she was just another form of entertainment for Morgan and her friends. I don't know what you're talking about, Emma replied, her voice quieter than she intended, but she was trying to stay calm, to not let Morgan get to her. Morgan raised an eyebrow, taking a step closer, her voice dropping lower. Don't play dumb. We all know what happened the other day. You thought you were something special, huh? Well, newsflash, no one cares. Before Emma could respond, one of Morgan's friends, Caitlin, snickered and added, yeah, you might want to learn your place before you make it worse. The laughter was like a punch to Emma's gut. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to break down in front of them, in front of all these people who were just waiting for her to fall apart. But the humiliation was so intense, so overwhelming, that for a moment, she thought she might just crumble. Morgan's voice cut through her thoughts. What's the matter, Emma? Cat got your tongue. Emma lifted her chin, but inside, she was trembling. She couldn't let Morgan see how much this hurt. She couldn't let anyone see how much it hurt. But that's when something unexpected happened. Is there a problem here? The voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made everyone freeze. Emma looked up in surprise to see Tyler standing there, just a few feet away. His presence was unexpected, but what shocked her even more was the way he was looking at Morgan, his expression unreadable, but firm. Morgan's smile faltered slightly, her eyes narrowing as she turned to face him. What do you want, Tyler? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. This is none of your business. Tyler didn't flinch. Actually, I think it is. You've been making Emma's life hell for weeks now. And I'm tired of watching it. There was a moment of silence, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tyler was standing up for her. Against Morgan. The same Tyler who had always been part of the popular crowd. Morgan's friends exchanged nervous glances, but they didn't speak up. Even they seemed to realize that something had shifted. Tyler, this is between me and Emma, Morgan said, though her voice now lacked the usual conviction. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, Tyler replied coolly. You've been bullying her, and it needs to stop. Now. Emma stood there, in shock. She had always felt invisible to people like Tyler. But now, here he was, standing by her side, calling out Morgan in front of everyone. He didn't have to do this. He could have walked away, just like everyone else had always done. But he didn't. Morgan's face twisted in frustration. "You think you can just swoop in and fix everything?" she sneered, but there was no conviction behind her words now. "You're not even part of this." Tyler didn't back down. "I don't care. This stops now, Morgan. Got it?" Morgan stood frozen for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she turned and stormed off, her friends trailing behind her. Emma watched them go, her heart still racing, her mind reeling from what had just happened. "Are you okay?" Tyler asked gently, looking at her with concern in his eyes. For the first time in days, Emma allowed herself to breathe, really breathe. I don't know. I didn't expect that. From you." Tyler gave a small smile. "I don't think anyone expects much from me. But I'm not gonna let people like Morgan treat others like crap." Emma didn't know what to say. The weight of everything, the ridicule, the pressure, the isolation, felt lighter in that moment. Tyler had done something for her that no one else had. He had shown up. For the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days after Tyler's intervention were a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty for Emma. On one hand, she felt lighter, like a burden had been lifted. Morgan and her crew had backed off for the time being, but Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was only temporary. Morgan was never one to let things slide for long. She would come back, and next time, Emma wasn't sure if she'd have someone like Tyler to stand beside her. Still, for the first time in weeks, Emma woke up feeling like she could take on the day. She walked into school with a quiet sense of strength, a far cry from the girl who had been shrinking away from the halls just a short time ago. As Emma moved through the crowded hallway, she could feel the usual eyes on her, but today, there was something different. It wasn't the whispers or the stares of judgment. This time, it was more like curiosity, like people were beginning to take notice of her for reasons that had nothing to do with Morgan's cruel games. Tyler wasn't in the hallway when Emma first arrived, and for a moment, she felt a pang of doubt. Would he just disappear back into his own world, now that he had done his good deed for the week? But then, as she made her way to her locker, she spotted him by the stairs, leaning against the railing, looking casual but somehow, concerned. "Hey," he said, offering a small wave as she approached. "How are you holding up?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to check in on her again so soon. For some reason, the gesture felt so sincere. "I'm better," she replied, smiling slightly. "Still not sure what to make of everything, but I'm definitely better." Tyler nodded, pushing himself off the railing to stand up straight. "That's good. And hey, just so you know, I'm not going anywhere. If Morgan or anyone else gives you a hard time, just let me know. I got your back." Emma blinked, surprised. "You really mean that?" He gave her a wry smile. "Yeah. You'd be surprised how many people only care when it's convenient for them. But I'm not like that. I won't just sit by and watch someone get bullied, especially when they don't deserve it." His words hit her harder than she expected. For so long, Emma had felt like she was all alone in this fight, like no one cared about what she was going through. But here was Tyler, a guy who had every reason to stay out of her drama, telling her that he would help her, no questions asked. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice quiet but filled with gratitude. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Tyler shrugged, looking a bit uncomfortable. "It's no big deal. I don't want you to think you have to go through this alone." As they stood there, chatting quietly, Emma felt something shift within her. The weight of the past few weeks was still there, still lingering, but it wasn't as heavy. Not with Tyler standing beside her. She hadn't realized how much she needed that support, even in the smallest form. Just knowing that someone cared, really cared, was enough to give her the strength to keep going. But as the bell rang, signaling the start of class, Emma's nerves started to return. She had been feeling a little more confident in the halls, but now the reality of facing her classmates, of dealing with Morgan's inevitable retaliation, was looming once again. Tyler, noticing the shift in her mood, gave her a reassuring look. "Don't worry," he said, offering her a half-smile. "I'll be around if you need me. We'll face this together." Emma smiled, feeling a bit lighter than before. "Thanks, Tyler. Really." As they made their way to their respective classes, Emma felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a friend, a real one. And that made all the difference. The next few days were a mix of small victories and lingering doubts. Emma couldn't escape the feeling that the storm was coming. Morgan hadn't forgotten what had happened, and Emma knew it was only a matter of time before she would strike back. But for now, she tried to keep her head up, focusing on the good things, like the growing connection between her and Tyler. They started sitting together at lunch, and their conversations, which had once been awkward and stilted, began to flow more easily. Tyler was funny, kind, and had this way of making Emma feel at ease. For the first time in ages, she found herself laughing genuinely, not out of nervousness or self-consciousness, but because she actually enjoyed his company. And it wasn't just Tyler. Slowly but surely, Emma started to notice other students looking at her differently. The whispers were still there, but now, some of them seemed more curious than cruel. She was starting to get noticed for something other than being the shy, quiet girl in the corner. And as she made a few more tentative steps out of her shell, she even found herself making eye contact with people in the halls, people who had once ignored her, now offering small smiles or nods of acknowledgement. One afternoon, as Emma and Tyler walked to their next class, she felt a tug at her sleeve. When she turned, she was surprised to see Caitlin, one of Morgan's usual followers, standing there. Her arms were crossed, and she was eyeing Emma with something that wasn't quite friendly, but wasn't full of venom either. "Hey," Caitlin said, sounding hesitant. "I just wanted to say, you've got guts, standing up to Morgan like that." Emma blinked, unsure of what was going on. Thanks." Caitlin gave a small shrug, her eyes shifting nervously. "I know Morgan's been a real jerk to you. Honestly, it's been kind of annoying to watch her treat people like that. I'm not saying I agree with everything you're doing, but I respect it. So, if you need anything, I'm not going to make your life harder." Emma was taken aback. Caitlin had always been one of Morgan's right-hand girls, the kind of person who laughed along with the jokes at Emma's expense. To hear her speak like this, like she was acknowledging Emma's strength, felt surreal. "Thanks, Caitlin," Emma said cautiously, still unsure whether this was real or just some kind of setup. "I appreciate it." Caitlin gave a quick nod, then turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there, her mind racing. Was Caitlin genuinely trying to change, or was this just a ploy to soften Emma up for something worse later on? It was hard to tell. But one thing was for sure, things were changing. Maybe not in the way Emma had imagined, and certainly not without its share of challenges, but they were changing. And maybe, just maybe, things weren't as bleak as they once seemed. The following week was a strange kind of calm, like the world was holding its breath. Emma was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, things would improve. Morgan hadn't made a move to retaliate, and even Caitlin's unexpected shift in attitude was a glimmer of hope. Tyler's support remained unwavering, and they had grown closer over the past few days, finding comfort in each other's company. Emma even noticed that some of the students who had once ignored her now seemed to be more welcoming. There was a lightness in her step that she hadn't felt in a long time. But deep down, Emma knew better. She had been in this position before, thinking that the storm had passed, only to find herself standing right in the middle of it once again. She had learned that things could change in the blink of an eye, and though she was grateful for the peace, she knew it couldn't last forever. Morgan was never one to give up that easily. It happened sooner than Emma expected. One afternoon, as she was sitting with Tyler at lunch, she saw Morgan walk in. It wasn't the usual, smug walk of a queen bee looking for attention, it was something different. Morgan's eyes were locked on Emma as she entered the cafeteria, and there was something dark and dangerous in her gaze. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. Tyler noticed Emma's sudden tension. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Emma didn't answer immediately, keeping her gaze on Morgan, who was now walking toward their table with her usual entourage in tow. It was clear that Morgan was heading straight for her. Emma's heart rate quickened, and for a split second, she wondered if she should just get up and walk away. But then she remembered Tyler's words, "I've got your back." Taking a deep breath, Emma straightened her back and looked Morgan directly in the eye. No more running, no more hiding. She was tired of being the target, and she wasn't going to let Morgan have the upper hand again. Morgan reached their table and stopped, her presence commanding attention from everyone nearby. The whole cafeteria seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first words to be spoken. "Well, Morgan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who we have here. Little Miss Hero herself." She smirked, her eyes flicking over to Tyler, who was staring at her with an unamused expression. "So, are you two an item now? Or are you just the latest charity case?" Emma felt a rush of anger, but she pushed it down. She couldn't let Morgan see how much she was affected. Instead, she forced herself to smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "No, Morgan, just two people who don't need to play your games." Morgan's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were having a little moment here," she said, her tone turning icy. "I guess I'll just get to the point, then. You think I've forgotten what happened the other day? I don't forget so easily." Emma's stomach twisted. There it was, the storm she had been waiting for. Morgan had been biding her time, and now, she was ready to strike. "You're really going to do this again?" Tyler's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm. "We're done with this, Morgan. You can't keep bullying people just because you think it's fun." Morgan sneered. "You really want to defend her? What's she ever done to deserve it, huh? You think she's some kind of victim? She's weak, Tyler. Always has been." The words hit Emma harder than she cared to admit. She wanted to shout at Morgan, to tell her she was wrong. But instead, she kept her voice steady. "You don't get to decide who I am, Morgan. I'm not weak. I'm not going to let you keep pushing me around." Morgan's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a cold, humorless smile. "We'll see about that." She turned sharply and walked away, her entourage following behind her. Emma exhaled a breath she didn't even realize she'd been holding. The tension in the air didn't dissipate, though. If anything, it had just intensified. "Are you okay?" Tyler asked again, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Emma nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was coming. "I will be," she said, but the words felt hollow. She knew Morgan wasn't going to let this go. Not when she was this determined to break Emma. That night, Emma sat on her bed, staring out the window as the sky darkened. She knew the storm was coming, but she had no idea what it would look like or when it would hit. All she could do was brace herself. She couldn't keep relying on Tyler to fight her battles, and she couldn't keep hoping that everything would somehow just work out. But then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. Emma picked it up, surprised to see a message from Caitlin. "Hey, I know this might sound strange, but I wanted to let you know that Morgan is planning something. It's not going to be pretty. Just wanted to give you a heads up." Emma stared at the message, her pulse quickening. What did Caitlin mean by that? And why was she telling Emma this? Before she could respond, another message followed. "I'm not on her side, Emma. I never was. I know I didn't exactly show it before, but I'm done with all the bullying. I just wanted to make sure you were ready for whatever's next." Emma's head was spinning. She had always seen Caitlin as one of Morgan's loyal followers. She had no idea what had prompted this change of heart, but it was clear that something bigger was coming. She quickly typed a response, "What do you mean by something?" Caitlin's reply came a few seconds later, "I can't say much, but Morgan has a way of making things worse. Just be careful." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Morgan was preparing for something, and Emma wasn't sure how much longer she could keep standing strong on her own. The calm before the storm was over. The storm was coming, and it was going to be worse than anything Emma had ever faced before. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but one thing was for certain, she wasn't going to face it alone. The next day at school felt different. The air was thick with tension, almost as if everyone could sense the storm that was brewing, but no one was quite sure when or where it would strike. Emma walked through the halls with a sense of dread in her stomach, her mind replaying the warnings from Caitlin. Just be careful. But how could she be careful when she didn't know what was coming? What kind of game was Morgan playing this time? And why was Caitlin suddenly on her side? It didn't make sense. The last few days had felt almost peaceful, but Emma knew she couldn't keep her guard down for long. Morgan didn't let things go. She never did. As Emma rounded the corner to her first class, she froze. Morgan was standing there, leaning against the lockers, a smug look on her face. She was flanked by her usual followers, Caitlin included. Emma's heart pounded as she tried to read the situation. Was Caitlin still loyal to Morgan, or had her message the night before been a sign that something had changed? Morgan noticed Emma's hesitation and smirked, pushing herself off the lockers. "Oh, look who it is. The quiet little mouse who thinks she's something special," she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. Emma felt a flush of anger rise in her chest, but she kept her breathing steady, her eyes meeting Morgan's with as much defiance as she could muster. "I'm not scared of you anymore, Morgan." Morgan raised an eyebrow, clearly entertained by the response. "Oh, I know you're not. But that's the funny thing, Emma," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "you don't have to be scared of me. Because you're about to find out that I don't need to lay a finger on you to ruin your life." Emma's stomach dropped as Morgan stepped closer. She was no longer the untouchable bully who could throw insults from a distance. Now, it seemed like she had something much worse planned. Emma didn't back away, but she felt a chill creep up her spine. "Is that a threat?" Emma asked, her voice firmer than she felt. Morgan smiled, a slow, cruel smile. "You'll see." Before Emma could say anything more, the bell rang, signaling the start of class. Morgan turned on her heel and walked away, her followers trailing behind her. Emma stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. What did Morgan mean by that? How was she going to ruin her life without physically touching her? She didn't have long to think about it. As she entered the classroom, she noticed that there were whispers in the air. It wasn't just Morgan's usual group anymore. The whole classroom seemed to be talking in hushed tones, casting furtive glances her way. It was like she was suddenly the center of attention, and not in a good way. Tyler was already sitting at their usual spot, looking over at Emma with a frown as she took her seat. "What's going on?" he asked in a low voice. Emma shook her head, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. "I don't know. But it's not good." And then, in the middle of class, it happened. The door swung open, and a teacher from the front office walked in, holding a stack of papers. The entire class fell silent, and all eyes turned to the stranger in the doorway. The teacher cleared his throat and then looked directly at Emma. "Emma Stone?" he asked, his voice loud and official. Everyone was staring now, every pair of eyes focused on her. Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she stood up, her legs shaking slightly. What was going on? The teacher glanced at the papers in his hands. "We need to speak with you. It's about an urgent matter." Emma exchanged a glance with Tyler, who looked just as confused and concerned as she was. The class was eerily still, and the whispers had started again. Emma felt a mix of anxiety and confusion wash over her as she followed the teacher out of the room. The walk to the front office felt like it took an eternity. Emma's mind raced, her thoughts jumping from one possibility to the next. What could this be about? Why did they need to speak to her? She glanced at the teacher beside her, but his face gave nothing away. When they reached the front office, the principal, Mrs. Carter, was sitting behind her desk, her expression serious. The teacher handed her the papers, and Emma felt her heart pound in her chest. Mrs. Carter looked up at her and gave a tight smile. "Emma," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "We've received some troubling reports regarding you." Emma's breath caught in her throat. What could she possibly have done to warrant this kind of attention? Mrs. Carter continued. "It's been brought to our attention that there have been several false rumors circulating about you. Some of these rumors are highly inappropriate, and we need to address them immediately." The words felt like a punch to the gut. False rumors? What was she talking about? These rumors, Mrs. Carter continued, have been spreading quickly through the student body. Some students have even made accusations that, well, let's just say they're designed to damage your reputation. Emma's head spun. She tried to keep her voice steady. What kind of rumors? What are they saying? Mrs. Carter paused for a moment, her expression growing more serious. There are accusations that you have been involved in some kind of inappropriate behavior that is not appropriate for our school. These rumors have been taken very seriously, and we're investigating them. Emma's blood ran cold. Her thoughts were all over the place. How could anyone say such things? Who would even start something like that? Mrs. Carter sighed. "I know this is a lot to take in, Emma. But we need to get to the bottom of this. These things can't be ignored. If you have any idea who might be spreading these lies about you, I need you to let me know." The words felt like a blur in Emma's mind. It took her a moment to even process what was happening. She could only think of one person, one name, who had the power to start something like this. Morgan. It was all starting to make sense now. Morgan's earlier threats had been more than just empty words. She was going to ruin Emma's life, and this was how. Emma swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't let them think these rumors were true. She couldn't let Morgan win. I don't know who's behind it," Emma said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I know that these rumors aren't true. I don't know why anyone would say such things about me." Mrs. Carter nodded, though her expression remained stern. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Emma. Don't worry. But until we do, I advise you to stay focused on your work. Keep a low profile. And if you need anything, let us know." Emma nodded numbly, her mind still reeling. She had to find a way to fight back against this. She couldn't let Morgan destroy everything she had worked so hard for. As Emma walked back to class, her heart was heavy with the knowledge that Morgan had just escalated things to a whole new level. This wasn't just about bullying anymore. This was about her reputation, her future. And if she didn't find a way to stop it, Morgan would succeed. Tyler was waiting for her when she returned, his expression serious as he noticed the look on her face. "What happened? Are you okay?" Emma let out a shaky breath. I don't know. But I think Morgan's really trying to destroy me. She's spreading rumors about me, and now the principal is involved." Tyler's eyes darkened with anger. "This isn't over, Emma. We'll fight back. We're not going to let her get away with this." Emma nodded, grateful for his support, but a sense of dread settled deep in her chest. She knew the fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. The days following the meeting with Mrs. Carter were a blur. Emma couldn't escape the feeling of dread that clung to her. Everywhere she went, people whispered. Her classmates' eyes followed her as she walked down the hall, and she heard her name more often than she would have liked. But it wasn't in a way that made her feel seen, it made her feel hunted. Morgan's plan was working. The rumors had spread like wildfire, and no one seemed willing to question them. Every time Emma heard someone talk behind her back, her stomach churned. What if people believed the lies? What if the whole school turned against her? Worse still, what if this ended up ruining her future? She couldn't afford to let that happen. Her heart felt heavy as she walked into her third period class, trying to ignore the stares from her peers. She set her backpack down at her desk, trying to steady her breathing. Tyler was already there, waiting for her. His gaze softened when he saw her face. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low. Emma gave a weak smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I don't know, Tyler. I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle." Tyler leaned in, his expression serious. "We're not giving up. You're not alone in this, Emma. You've got me, and you've got Caitlin now." Emma blinked in surprise. "Caitlin? She's on our side now?" Tyler nodded. "Yeah. I talked to her last night. She said she didn't want to be a part of what Morgan's doing. She's been feeling guilty about everything that's happened." A flicker of hope sparked in Emma's chest. She hadn't expected Caitlin to come around, but now that she had, Emma could see how much more power they'd have against Morgan. Maybe they could turn the tide after all. The bell rang, signaling the start of class. As Emma sat down, she felt a small sense of relief, at least she didn't have to face Morgan's direct assault at this moment. But her relief was short-lived. Throughout the entire class, her mind raced. She couldn't stop thinking about how she could fight back. It wasn't just about defending herself, it was about proving to everyone that the rumors were lies. By the time the bell rang again, Emma was exhausted. But she couldn't afford to let it show. She had to act now, while there was still a chance. Later that afternoon, Emma met with Tyler and Caitlin at the library. It was quiet there, a perfect place for planning. Caitlin had already arrived when Emma and Tyler walked in, her usual calm demeanor replaced with an air of determination. "Thanks for meeting up," Caitlin said as they sat down at a table in the corner of the library. "No problem," Tyler replied. "We need to figure this out. We can't let Morgan just destroy Emma's reputation like this." Caitlin nodded. "I agree. And I know I've been part of Morgan's little circle, but I can't keep pretending that what she's doing is okay. What happened to Emma isn't right." Emma smiled weakly at Caitlin. "I appreciate it, Caitlin. I really do." Caitlin shifted uncomfortably but then looked Emma in the eye. "I know you probably don't trust me completely, and I get it. But I'm in this with you now. I'm not going to let Morgan do this to you or anyone else." Tyler gave a reassuring nod. "We need to take action. If Morgan's been spreading lies about Emma, we need to expose the truth." Emma took a deep breath. "I don't know where to start. Everything's so messed up right now." "We start by gathering evidence," Caitlin said firmly. "We need to show that these rumors are just that, rumors. We need to talk to the people who are spreading them and get them to confess." Emma hesitated. "But if we confront them, won't that make it worse?" "It might, but at least we'll have something concrete to stand on. People can't just spread lies and get away with it," Caitlin said. "We've got to make sure this stops before it destroys everything." Tyler's eyes lit up as he joined in. "And if we get the right people to back us up, we might be able to make a bigger impact. Maybe even the teachers, or better yet, the school administration." Emma felt a spark of determination within her. It was risky, but she couldn't let Morgan's lies control her life. Not anymore. If she wanted to clear her name, she had to take action. "Okay," Emma said, her voice steady. "Let's do it. Let's take this to Morgan. We'll confront her and show everyone that this isn't true." The plan wasn't perfect. In fact, it was dangerous. But Emma was tired of being passive. She couldn't let Morgan control her anymore. She had to stand up for herself, even if it meant facing the chaos head-on. The next day at lunch, Emma, Tyler, and Caitlin found themselves sitting at their usual table. The atmosphere in the cafeteria was tense. Emma could feel the stares, the whispers, the invisible weight of everyone's judgment. But today, she wasn't going to cower. She was going to fight. A few minutes into their lunch, Morgan appeared, flanked by her usual group of followers, including Caitlin. This time, however, Caitlin was sitting apart from them, and she didn't seem to have the same smug expression as usual. Morgan's eyes found Emma almost immediately, and the usual sneer curled at her lips. "So, I see you've gathered your little team," Morgan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "How adorable." Emma stood up, her palms sweaty but her resolve solid. "Morgan, I'm done with your lies. You don't get to ruin my life just because you're bored. I'm not the one people should be afraid of here, you are." Morgan's face faltered for a moment, just a flicker of surprise. But she recovered quickly, her lips curling into a smirk. "Oh, Emma. You think you can just stand up to me? You really don't get it, do you? I have the power here. You're just a joke." Emma felt her heart race, but she didn't back down. "Not anymore. I'm taking this to the school. I'm going to make sure the truth comes out." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma saw a hint of uncertainty in Morgan's eyes. Emma's stomach churned with both fear and triumph. This was her moment. It was a battle, but it was one Emma couldn't afford to lose. "You think you can win this? You're a fool," Morgan spat, before turning away. As she walked off with her followers trailing behind, Caitlin lingered for a moment, giving Emma a tentative smile. "You're doing the right thing. It's not easy, but you've got this." Emma nodded, her heart racing. She wasn't going to let Morgan's manipulation control her any longer. The battle was just beginning, but Emma was ready for it. The days after Emma's confrontation with Morgan felt like a strange limbo. She had stood up for herself, confronted the bully, and even gathered the support of Tyler and Caitlin. But despite her bravery, the battle was far from over. Morgan hadn't backed down, and Emma's name still lingered in the halls, whispered about and smeared. But now, Emma knew something Morgan didn't. The fight wasn't just about the rumors anymore. It was about proving her strength, proving that she wasn't going to be the quiet twin who let people walk all over her. She was Emma Stone, and she was done being silent. Emma sat at her usual lunch table with Tyler and Caitlin, trying to ignore the glares from Morgan and her clique, who sat across the room. It was hard to miss the tension in the air. The cafeteria felt like a battlefield, and she was the target. "I can't believe she's still acting like she's in control," Tyler muttered, his eyes flickering over to Morgan's table. "She's trying to make you the bad guy, Emma. We need to end this before she digs her claws in deeper." Emma nodded. "I know. But what if it's not enough? What if the lies stick? People seem to believe them." Caitlin, who had been silent up until now, leaned in with a determined look. "We can't let that happen. You've been fighting with everything you have, and we need to make sure the truth gets out there." "I don't even know where to begin," Emma said, her voice low. "It's like everything's stacked against me. Morgan has everyone in her pocket." Tyler's eyes hardened. "Not everyone. You've got us. And we're not the only ones," Caitlin added. "I think it's time we take this to the next level." Emma's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Caitlin smiled, a glimmer of mischief in her eyes. "We go to the source. We talk to the people Morgan's been using to spread the lies. They won't be able to deny it if we have proof." It was risky. But Emma knew they were running out of time. Morgan was pushing her limits, and every day the lies grew more entrenched. Emma's mind raced. If they could confront those who had spread the rumors, they might just be able to uncover the truth before it was too late. The plan was simple, but dangerous. The three of them would split up, talking to the students who had been the most vocal in spreading the rumors. Caitlin would speak to the people in her social circle, trying to convince them to back down and admit the lies. Tyler would approach a few of the athletes who had been involved, using his rapport with them to try to get them to turn on Morgan. And Emma? Emma would confront the one person who had been the loudest in spreading the false stories about her, Sarah, a popular girl in the grade above, who had a knack for gossiping. The next morning, the three of them gathered in the parking lot before school, each one with a serious expression on their face. The air was cool, and the sky was overcast, mirroring the heavy feeling in Emma's chest. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. "Ready?" Tyler asked, his voice quiet but firm. Emma took a deep breath, then nodded. "Let's do this." The first step was to find Sarah. Emma had heard the whispers. Sarah had been one of the first to repeat the damaging rumors about her. The girl was always surrounded by her clique, and Emma knew that confronting her would be a challenge. By lunchtime, Emma spotted Sarah sitting at one of the tables near the back of the cafeteria. She was laughing with her friends, the picture of someone completely oblivious to the storm they were about to face. Emma swallowed the knot in her throat and stood up. "Are you sure about this?" Tyler asked, standing next to her. Emma nodded, steeling herself. "I have to. I can't let this go any longer." Tyler squeezed her shoulder. "I'll be right behind you." They walked together toward Sarah's table, and as they approached, the conversation at the table fell silent. Emma could feel all eyes on her as she stepped forward. She stopped just short of the table, trying to appear confident despite the storm raging inside her. "Sarah," Emma said, her voice steady. "We need to talk." Sarah looked up, her expression twisting into something between amusement and disdain. "Oh, look. It's the quiet twin. What do you want, Emma?" Emma's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "I want to know why you're spreading lies about me. I want to know what you have against me." For a moment, Sarah didn't speak. Her eyes flickered over Emma, then to Tyler, who stood beside her, offering a silent show of support. The room seemed to hold its breath. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah said, shrugging. "There's nothing to talk about. The truth is out there. Everyone knows who you really are." "That's the problem," Emma replied, her voice growing stronger. "The truth isn't out there. The things you're saying about me, they're lies." Sarah's smirk faltered for just a second, and Emma saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was losing control. Emma pressed on. "Why are you doing this, Sarah? What did I ever do to you?" The question hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Sarah didn't respond. Then, in a quiet voice, she muttered, "Morgan told me to." Emma's heart sank, but she didn't show it. This was the moment they needed. They had just cracked the wall of silence. "What did she tell you to do?" Emma asked, her voice low but insistent. Sarah looked around the table at her friends, who were now watching her with a mix of curiosity and fear. "She said it was just a joke," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said everyone would think it was funny, and it would make you pay for being so different." Emma took a deep breath, fighting back the wave of emotion threatening to overtake her. "So you just went along with it? Without questioning it?" Sarah nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the table. "I didn't want to get on Morgan's bad side." Emma could feel the weight of Sarah's words. Morgan's manipulation went deeper than Emma had realized. She wasn't just trying to hurt Emma, she was using everyone to do her dirty work, playing the game from the shadows. "Well, it's not funny anymore," Emma said, her voice clear and strong. "And it's time for it to stop." Sarah remained silent for a moment, and then, to Emma's surprise, she looked up. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was going this far. I didn't think." "You didn't think at all," Emma cut in. "But you can fix it. Tell everyone the truth. Let them know that you were part of Morgan's game, and that it's all lies. Sarah's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she nodded. I will. I'll make it right. Emma felt a rush of relief as she walked away from Sarah's table, her heart still racing but filled with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't over, but this was a start. As she met up with Caitlin and Tyler outside the cafeteria, Caitlin gave her a small smile. How'd it go? Emma exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly. She admitted it. Morgan's behind all of it. Tyler grinned. One down, a few more to go. Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. This was just the beginning. They were going to expose the truth. And once they did, Morgan's reign of terror would finally be over. The days after Sarah's confession felt like a whirlwind. Emma had hoped that speaking with Sarah would be the breakthrough they needed, but Morgan wasn't going to let things slide that easily. As much as Emma felt the weight of relief in Sarah's words, she also felt the dark cloud of uncertainty hanging over her. What if Morgan retaliated? What if everything Emma had worked so hard for came crashing down? But that wasn't something Emma was willing to let happen anymore. She walked into school the next morning with a sense of quiet determination, ignoring the whispers that followed her like shadows. She was no longer the quiet twin who let things pass by. She was Emma Stone, and she had a voice, one that would be heard. Ready for today? Tyler asked as he met her outside the cafeteria, a small smile on his face. Emma nodded, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room. Morgan's clique was seated at the usual table, but this time, there was something different. Morgan wasn't leading the group with her usual air of superiority. In fact, she was talking to her friends in hushed tones, her brow furrowed in frustration. I'm guessing things aren't going as smoothly for her, Tyler said, noticing Emma's gaze. Emma didn't answer right away. She was too busy watching Morgan, who looked anything but confident now. There was something in her posture, something telling Emma that Morgan was beginning to realize the game was no longer in her favor. It wasn't just the guilt of the lies catching up, it was the realization that Emma had figured out how to fight back. She's losing control, Emma muttered, her voice low. Caitlin appeared beside them, joining the conversation. We need to keep the pressure on. If we can get a few more people to back us up, Morgan won't have anywhere to hide. Emma's mind raced. What if they could finally get the school to see the truth? If Sarah could admit Morgan was behind the rumors, maybe other people would start coming forward, too. I think it's time we take this to the next level, Emma said, her voice steady with resolve. The next step of their plan was clear, they needed to gather evidence. If they were going to expose Morgan for the manipulative liar she was, they needed more than just Sarah's word. They needed others who had been affected by Morgan's cruelty, people who could back up the story with their own experiences. Emma, Caitlin, and Tyler spent the rest of the day talking to people. It wasn't easy. Morgan had her claws deep in the social fabric of the school, and a lot of people were still too scared to speak out. But slowly, piece by piece, they gathered testimonies. They found students who had been bullied by Morgan in the past, people who had been made to feel small just for being different. These were the voices they needed to amplify. At the end of the day, as Emma was about to head home, she got a text from Caitlin, "We got this. The truth is coming out. Are you ready to bring it to the principal?" Emma stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the message. Her heart raced as the reality of the situation set in. They were going to do it. They were going to expose everything to the school administration, and once they did, there would be no turning back. The next morning, Emma and her team gathered in the principal's office. Principal Hall was a no-nonsense type of person, the kind of leader who commanded respect but also expected accountability. As Emma sat across from him, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it, the turning point. Tyler, Caitlin, and Emma had carefully compiled everything they had, testimonies, screenshots of messages, and even a few photos showing how Morgan had manipulated her followers. It wasn't just about rumors anymore, it was about cruelty and abuse, and they were ready to bring it to light. "Principal Hall," Emma began, her voice strong despite the nerves threatening to overtake her. "We need to talk about something serious. Something that's been happening in this school that's been affecting not just me, but a lot of students." Principal Hall, who had been reviewing a file on his desk, looked up. "What's going on, Emma? You know you can always come to me with concerns." Emma took a deep breath and motioned to the others. "This isn't just a concern. It's a pattern of bullying, harassment, and manipulation. Morgan Carter has been spreading lies about me and trying to turn people against me. But it's not just me, she's done this to others, too. And it's been going on for months." There was a long pause. Principal Hall raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. But Emma wasn't backing down. She had the evidence. She had the truth. Tyler spoke up next. "We've talked to several students, including some of Morgan's former friends, and they've admitted that she's been the one orchestrating all of this. She's been spreading rumors about Emma, and it's gone way too far." Caitlin, who had been nervously shifting in her seat, now spoke with a surprising level of confidence. "I used to be part of Morgan's group, and I can tell you, everything Emma said is true. I've seen Morgan do worse to others, and I feel guilty for not saying anything sooner." Principal Hall's expression softened, but he remained professional. "I appreciate you all bringing this to my attention. I'll need to look into this further, of course, but it sounds like you've gathered a lot of information." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. This was happening. They were finally going to bring Morgan's reign to an end. It wasn't long before the investigation began. Students were interviewed, teachers were questioned, and soon the full extent of Morgan's manipulation became clear. Her followers started distancing themselves, realizing that they had been part of something toxic. And slowly, the truth began to unravel. The tipping point came when Sarah, once Morgan's most loyal ally, came forward and corroborated everything Emma and her team had said. With her confession, the truth was undeniable. As the days passed, Emma watched as Morgan's world started to crumble. Her friends began to abandon her, her social status dissolved, and whispers followed her wherever she went. For the first time, Emma felt what it was like to stand in the light, free from the shadows of fear and doubt. But even as Morgan's influence faded, Emma knew that the battle wasn't over yet. The scars left by Morgan's actions were deep, and they would take time to heal. But Emma had learned something valuable during this journey: no one had the right to make her feel small. She was stronger than she'd ever known, and she was ready to fight for the future she deserved. The days following the revelation of Morgan's manipulation were like a whirlwind, filled with emotions Emma had never expected to feel. The truth was finally out there, but that didn't mean everything would magically be okay. In fact, things were far from it. At school, the atmosphere was charged. Whispers still echoed in the hallways, but now, they weren't about Emma, they were about Morgan. For the first time, Morgan was the one under the microscope. Her social standing, which had once been so secure, was now teetering on the edge of collapse. Emma walked into school with Tyler and Caitlin by her side. As they passed through the main doors, she could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. There were stares, some of pity, others of admiration, and a few still with suspicion. She wasn't sure which was worse. At least when she was the target, she knew exactly where she stood. Now, everything felt different. The world around her seemed to have shifted. "How do you feel?" Caitlin asked quietly, walking alongside Emma. Emma glanced at her. "I feel like the storm is just beginning." She had expected things to settle after the truth came out. She'd hoped that once people saw Morgan for who she really was, they would let Emma go. But it wasn't that simple. There were still those who feared Morgan. And despite the growing evidence against her, there were people who still clung to Morgan's side, unwilling to let go of the illusion of power she once held. "I know it's rough," Tyler added, his voice sympathetic. "But you've got us. And we've got your back." "Yeah," Emma said, her voice quiet but steady. But it's not just about the rumors anymore. It's about everything. How people see me. How they see us. They reached the cafeteria, and Emma hesitated before walking inside. The tension in the air was palpable. Morgan's usual group was still there, but now it was clear they were fractured. Some of them were still sitting with her, others had distanced themselves. And Morgan herself, well, she looked like a shadow of the girl she once was. No longer the queen of the social scene, no longer in control. But despite her crumbling empire, Morgan still had that look in her eyes, the look of someone who refused to accept defeat. As Emma and her friends walked into the cafeteria, Morgan's eyes locked onto hers. For a moment, it felt like the entire room was frozen. Emma could almost hear the challenge in Morgan's stare, the promise that the fight wasn't over. Emma met her gaze, her chin lifting slightly, refusing to back down. The tables had turned, but she knew Morgan wouldn't go down without a fight. The next few days were tense, and Morgan's retaliation came sooner than Emma had anticipated. It started subtly, small things that made Emma's days just a little harder. A sneer here, a whispered insult there. Morgan's followers began to circulate rumors again, trying to twist the truth and paint Emma as the instigator. The principal's investigation had started to lose steam as people grew tired of the drama, but Emma wasn't about to let Morgan regain control. This time, she wouldn't let Morgan or anyone else define her. Emma leaned over her lunch table, whispering to Caitlin and Tyler. "We need to put an end to this for good. Morgan's not going to stop until she's taken me down." "She's scared," Caitlin said, her voice sharp. "That's why she's lashing out." "I don't care about her fear," Emma replied, her tone steady. "I care about putting an end to this. If we don't stop her now, it'll only get worse." Tyler nodded. "So, what's the plan?" Emma thought for a moment. It was time to make it clear to everyone that Morgan's lies had no place in their school. They needed to remind everyone that Morgan wasn't just a bully, she was a manipulator. The school had to know that they were all complicit in allowing Morgan to get away with this for so long. "We're going public," Emma said finally. "We need to make sure that Morgan can't hide behind her lies anymore. We need to go to the school assembly and tell the truth. Everyone needs to hear it from us, not from her." Tyler and Caitlin exchanged a glance, and then both nodded in agreement. "I think it's a good idea," Caitlin said, her voice resolute. "The more people who know, the less power she has." The school assembly was scheduled for the following week. Emma had already prepared herself for what would be one of the most difficult moments of her life. It wasn't just about standing up to Morgan anymore, it was about standing up for herself, for everything she'd endured, and for everyone who had ever been hurt by Morgan's cruelty. On the day of the assembly, Emma's stomach was in knots. She stood backstage, waiting for her turn to speak. Her hands shook slightly, and her heart raced. This was it. No more hiding. No more running. She was going to make sure that everyone knew the truth. "You've got this," Tyler said, appearing at her side. His presence was a steadying force. Caitlin also came over, offering her a warm smile. "You don't need to do this alone." Emma took a deep breath, nodding. She was ready. When it was Emma's turn to speak, she stepped out in front of the entire student body, feeling the weight of their gazes on her. Morgan was in the front row, her eyes narrowed, her arms crossed. Emma could see the anger building in her, but she knew this was the only way to end it. If Morgan wouldn't stop, then Emma would have to force her to face the consequences. "Everyone," Emma began, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength with every word. "I'm here today because I want you to hear the truth. For too long, I've been silenced, bullied, and harassed. And it's time for that to end." The room was silent. Emma could feel every eye on her, every breath held as they waited for her next words. "For months, Morgan Carter has been spreading lies about me," Emma continued. "She's manipulated people, made them believe things that aren't true. And I let it happen. I let her control me, because I was too scared to speak up. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before she went on. But not anymore. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting someone control my life with lies. Morgan has been bullying me and using her influence to hurt others. She's not the person she wants you to think she is. Emma's eyes locked onto Morgan's, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world disappeared. There was only Emma, standing in front of her, finally telling the truth. I'm not the one who should be ashamed. Morgan is. She's the one who's been tearing us apart. And it's time for that to stop. The silence that followed Emma's words was deafening. For a long moment, no one moved. But then, slowly, the whispers began. And for the first time, Emma didn't feel afraid. She felt powerful. When she stepped off the stage, Caitlin and Tyler were waiting for her, their faces filled with pride. You did it, Caitlin said softly, giving Emma a hug. Emma smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. We did it. But even as Emma walked out of the assembly, she knew this wasn't the end. The fight for her freedom was far from over. But with every step she took, she knew she was one step closer to ending Morgan's reign for good. The morning after the assembly was a mix of emotions for Emma. She had stood up in front of the whole school, finally putting her truth out there, and yet, as she walked down the hallway, she could feel the weight of uncertainty hanging over her. The school's atmosphere had shifted, no longer just whispers of rumors, but now full-blown discussions about what had happened, what Emma had revealed, and who the real culprit was. As Emma walked to her locker, her stomach tightened. She had felt empowered speaking in front of the student body, but now, with the reality of her actions settling in, she wasn't sure how things would play out. Morgan hadn't taken her accusations lightly. She knew it was only a matter of time before Morgan made her next move. Caitlin and Tyler were already at their lockers, waiting for her. They had been there for her throughout this entire ordeal, and their presence gave her a sense of security. You okay? Caitlin asked, her voice gentle. Emma gave a weak smile. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've just set off a bomb. There's no going back now. You did the right thing, Tyler reassured her, his expression serious. You stood up for yourself. And now everyone knows the truth. Emma nodded, but a nagging doubt still clung to her. I just hope people are ready to believe it. Morgan still has a lot of power here. She's not just going to let me get away with this. True to Emma's prediction, Morgan's retaliation was swift. The next day, a group of her remaining followers cornered Emma in the hallway after school. It wasn't a physical confrontation, but the verbal assault was just as damaging. You think you've won? Morgan's voice rang out from the crowd, sharp and full of venom. You think telling your little story in front of everyone is going to change things? You're just a pathetic little girl who couldn't handle the pressure. Emma stood her ground, not letting Morgan's words shake her. She had already faced this kind of cruelty from Morgan for too long to let it affect her now. I didn't start this, Morgan, Emma said, her voice steady. But I'm sure as hell going to finish it. Morgan's eyes flickered with something like surprise. She wasn't used to being challenged this way, not by Emma, not by anyone. You're nothing without your friends, Morgan sneered. You're weak, and they're just using you. Emma didn't flinch. I'm not the one who's been manipulating people. You are. There was a tense silence as the crowd waited for Morgan's response. But instead of continuing the verbal battle, Morgan turned on her heel and walked away, her followers trailing behind her. For a moment, Emma stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't backing down. She had done it. She had stood up to Morgan, and no matter how hard Morgan tried, she couldn't take Emma down anymore. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Emma knew that the battle wasn't over. Morgan still had people who believed in her, still had influence over the school. But with every passing moment, Emma felt a little more secure. She was no longer just the quiet twin who stayed in the background. She was Emma Stone, and she had found her voice. One afternoon, while Emma was walking to her next class, a hand suddenly touched her shoulder. She spun around, startled, only to find Sarah standing there. Emma's heart skipped a beat, but there was no anger in Sarah's eyes, just something that looked like regret. "Can we talk?" Sarah asked softly, her voice full of vulnerability. Emma hesitated, the tension between them palpable. But after a moment, she nodded and motioned for Sarah to follow her to a quieter part of the school. Once they were out of earshot, Sarah took a deep breath. I want to apologize for everything. For all the lies, for not standing up for you sooner. I was scared of what Morgan would do to me if I went against her. But the truth is, I'm just as guilty for letting it happen as she is." Emma studied Sarah for a long moment. She had always known there was more to Sarah than the girl who had been so caught up in Morgan's influence. But hearing her say it, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, made Emma realize how much had changed. "I get it," Emma said softly. "I understand why you did what you did. But it still hurt. You were my friend, Sarah, and I trusted you." "I know," Sarah whispered, her eyes downcast. "And I'll never be able to take that back. But if there's anything I can do to make it right, please let me know. I don't want to be a part of her game anymore." For a long time, Emma didn't know what to say. It was hard to forgive, harder still to trust Sarah again. But then she remembered something her mother had told her: forgiveness didn't mean letting someone off the hook, it meant giving yourself the peace you deserved. "Maybe we can start over," Emma said quietly, the weight in her chest easing a little. "But it's going to take time. You've got a lot to prove, Sarah." "I understand," Sarah said, a small but genuine smile crossing her face. "I'll do whatever it takes." The next few days brought a surprising turn of events. Morgan, who had once held the reins of the social scene with an iron grip, found herself increasingly isolated. Her followers had begun to drop off, one by one. Some were starting to come forward, admitting their role in the manipulation and lies that had spread through the school. Others had been too afraid to speak out, but now, with the truth out there, they no longer had to hide. One morning, Emma found a note slipped into her locker. She opened it, her heart racing, unsure of what to expect. It read, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hope we can be friends again someday. Sarah." Emma stared at the note for a long time. The handwriting was shaky, almost as though Sarah had written it with the weight of her guilt on her shoulders. Slowly, Emma tucked the note into her bag. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Maybe, just maybe, Sarah could be a part of her life again. By the end of the week, the principal had called another assembly. Emma wasn't sure what to expect, but when she stepped into the gym, she saw that Morgan was nowhere to be found. Instead, the principal stood at the front of the room, a solemn expression on his face. "Students," Principal Hall began, his voice steady. "After conducting further investigations, it has become clear that some students have been victims of manipulation and bullying. We take these matters very seriously here at this school. Morgan Carter has been suspended indefinitely, and her actions will be addressed accordingly." Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. It was done. Morgan had been exposed, and the school was finally taking action. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she could breathe again. But as she looked around the room, she saw the faces of the students who had been too afraid to speak out before, students who had been hurt by Morgan's cruelty. Now, it seemed like they were finally ready to stand tall. The days following the principal's announcement were a blur of mixed emotions for Emma. On the one hand, there was the undeniable relief that Morgan was no longer able to control the school. But on the other, Emma knew that things wouldn't go back to the way they were, at least not right away. As much as Emma longed for normalcy, she couldn't ignore the scars that had been left behind. Her friendship with Caitlin and Tyler had deepened, but the strain of everything that had happened was still there, especially when it came to the whispers in the halls. Some people had accepted the truth, others were still hesitant, and some were simply too invested in Morgan's version of events to believe anything else. Despite everything, Emma was proud of herself. Proud of how far she had come, how much she had changed. The quiet twin who had once been afraid to speak up had become someone who could stand tall in front of an entire room and speak the truth. But even with that newfound strength, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to this story. The truth had come out about Morgan, but it was clear that there were still a lot of unanswered questions, not just about Morgan, but about everyone who had been involved in the drama that had torn through their school. As she sat at lunch with Caitlin and Tyler, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the past few months pressing on her shoulders. "Do you think it's really over?" Emma asked, staring at her lunch tray but not really seeing it. Caitlin looked at her, eyebrows furrowed in thought. "I don't know." Morgan suspended, "But you know how it is with someone like her. She's not going to just let this go. I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to come back and make things worse." Emma nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. She's too determined, too used to getting what she wants. But I can't let that stop me anymore. I've fought too hard to go back to hiding." Tyler, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "It's not just about her. It's about you, Emma. You're stronger now, and people can see that. And even if Morgan tries to cause trouble, you've got a whole bunch of people who are on your side now." Emma smiled weakly, appreciating their support. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to come. The battle with Morgan had been one thing, but she had a feeling that the real work, figuring out how to rebuild and heal, was just beginning. The next day, Emma got another surprise. As she was walking to her locker, she spotted Sarah again. This time, Sarah wasn't alone. A few other girls from the group who had once followed Morgan were standing with her, and they were all looking at Emma as if they weren't sure what to expect. Sarah stepped forward, holding out a small envelope. "Emma," she said, her voice softer than it had been before. "I know we haven't talked much, but I just wanted to give this to you." Emma took the envelope, her curiosity piqued. "What's this?" "It's an apology letter," Sarah explained, her gaze steady. "From all of us. We know we hurt you, and we just want you to know that we're sorry." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected the girls who had once been so loyal to Morgan to come forward like this. She hadn't expected them to admit their wrongs, to make it right. She opened the envelope and began reading. The letter wasn't long, but the words were heartfelt, full of regret. Each girl had written a brief note, apologizing for the pain they had caused, acknowledging their role in enabling Morgan, and expressing their desire to make amends. "I don't know if we'll ever be friends again," Sarah's note read. "But I want you to know that I respect you for what you did. You showed me what it means to be strong, and I'll never forget that." Tears stung Emma's eyes as she finished reading. She didn't know what to say. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step. She had never expected any of this, but somehow, it felt like the right thing. Maybe they hadn't all been bad. Maybe they had just been caught in the wrong situation. Emma folded the letter carefully and looked up at Sarah. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but full of meaning. "I appreciate this. I really do." Sarah nodded, a faint smile crossing her face. "I know it's not much, but I just wanted to do something to make it right." Emma glanced around at the other girls, who were all watching her, waiting for her response. She wasn't sure what would come next, but one thing was clear, the tension that had existed between them had started to dissolve. As the days passed, life at school began to return to something like normal. The tension that had clouded the hallways was slowly dissipating, replaced by a sense of relief. The truth had come out, and while the consequences had been harsh, they had been necessary. But for Emma, there was still work to do. She knew that the scars left by Morgan's bullying wouldn't disappear overnight. And she still had to figure out how to rebuild the relationships she'd lost, not just with Sarah, but with everyone who had been affected by Morgan's manipulations. One afternoon, as Emma sat alone in the library, she found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. It felt like a lifetime ago that she and Morgan had been inseparable, that she had been the quiet twin who let herself fade into the background. But now, as she looked back on everything, she realized just how much she had changed. She wasn't the same girl who had let others walk all over her. She wasn't the same girl who had been too afraid to speak up. She was stronger now, and though she knew she would still face challenges, she also knew she was capable of overcoming them. It was Tyler who found her in the library that afternoon, his usual grin plastered across his face. "You've been thinking too much again, haven't you?" Emma smiled at him, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "I guess I have." "Well," Tyler said, sitting down beside her, "don't forget to take a breath every now and then. You've been through a lot, but you've come out on top. You deserve a little peace now." Emma leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at the falling leaves. The storm had passed. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could finally breathe. The weeks following the letter and Morgan's suspension had brought some peace, but Emma knew that the real test was still ahead. The dust had settled somewhat, but the path to true healing would take time. There were days when Emma felt like she was walking on a tightrope, still unsure of what to trust, still unsure if the world around her had truly changed, or if the calm was just the quiet before another storm. Her friendship with Caitlin and Tyler had only grown stronger, and she found herself leaning on them more than she had ever imagined. They had been her rock throughout the entire ordeal, always there to remind her that she wasn't alone, that she was enough. But as the days passed, Emma realized that there was something missing in her life. It wasn't just the absence of Morgan, or even the lingering shadows of the bullying, it was the emptiness she felt in her own heart, the disconnection she had with herself. She hadn't just been fighting against Morgan, she had been fighting against her own doubts, her own fears. And now, with Morgan out of the picture, Emma was left with the realization that the true challenge wasn't just the outside world, it was finding the strength to believe in herself. One afternoon, while walking to class with Caitlin, Emma noticed that the hallway felt quieter than usual. People had started to speak more openly, and the whispered conversations that used to flood the halls had all but disappeared. As she passed by, she saw familiar faces, some smiling at her, some avoiding eye contact. It was clear that the tide had turned. The students who had once been afraid to speak out were now standing a little taller. "Looks like things are really changing," Caitlin remarked, nodding towards a group of students who were chatting in the hallway. "People are finally starting to realize that they can be themselves again." Emma smiled softly, but the unease in her chest didn't completely go away. "Yeah, but it's still weird. Like, I don't know who to trust anymore. Even with everything that happened, I don't know if it's all really over." Caitlin stopped walking and turned to her, her expression serious. "Emma, you can't keep carrying the weight of everyone else's actions. You've done the hard part. You stood up for what's right. Now it's time to let go of the fear and start living for you." Emma sighed, her shoulders sagging. "I know. But I don't even know what that means yet." "You'll figure it out," Caitlin said, giving her a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you think. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just keep moving forward." Despite her conversation with Caitlin, Emma still wrestled with the sense of uncertainty that had been hanging over her. Every day felt like an experiment, a test of how much she had truly grown. She found herself slipping into old habits, questioning if she was strong enough to stand her ground when new challenges appeared. She didn't have Morgan to face anymore, but the landscape of her school had changed. The subtle shifts in friendships, the newfound attention from people who had once ignored her, were all things she hadn't quite learned how to navigate. It was in moments like these that Emma realized how much her sense of self had been tied to the opinions of others. She had let Morgan's cruelty shape her view of who she was. Now, without the shadow of Morgan looming over her, Emma was forced to confront the real question: who was she without the bullying? Without the noise? Without the need to prove herself? The weekend after the hallway conversation with Caitlin, Emma found herself sitting at home, staring out her bedroom window. She wasn't sure what to do with herself. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the years before the bullying had started. She had been so carefree, so confident in her own skin. But somewhere along the way, she had lost that spark, the part of her that believed anything was possible, the part of her that saw the world as something to conquer. She missed that version of herself. It was then that she remembered something her mom had told her: it's okay to take your time. You don't have to have everything figured out right now, Emma. The most important thing is that you keep moving forward, one step at a time. Emma closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet of her room. She had been rushing for so long, rushing to fix everything, rushing to get back to the way things used to be, rushing to heal the wounds Morgan had left behind. But healing didn't happen on a schedule. Healing was a process, one that didn't have to be rushed. The following Monday, Emma walked into school with a new sense of calm. She had made a decision. She wasn't going to let the pressure of what everyone else expected from her weigh her down anymore. She was going to take her time, find herself again, and trust that things would fall into place when they were ready. As she passed through the hallways, she noticed something different. The whispers, the looks, the judgment, it was all still there, but it didn't matter as much. She wasn't going to let it affect her. Not anymore. That day, she made a choice to do something that had once seemed impossible. She joined the art club. Art had always been a passion of hers, something she had loved doing but had abandoned for years. She had pushed it aside in favor of fitting in, of avoiding attention. But now, she wanted to reconnect with herself, with her creativity, with the part of her that had always been there but had been buried under the weight of everything else. Walking into the art room felt like stepping into a new world. The smell of paint and clay, the soft hum of students working on their projects, the freedom of expression, it was all so refreshing. She had been so focused on the battle with Morgan, so consumed with surviving, that she had forgotten the simple joy of doing something just for herself. As she settled into her seat, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The room was full of students, but no one was judging her, no one was looking at her with curiosity or pity. Here, in this space, she could just be Emma. That evening, as she sat at her desk working on her latest sketch, her phone buzzed with a message from Caitlin. "Hey, how was art club today? You were quiet when I saw you earlier." Emma smiled, typing back quickly, "It was amazing. I think I finally found something that makes me feel like me again." Caitlin's reply came almost immediately, "That's awesome, Em. I'm so proud of you. Take it slow. You've got this." Emma set her phone down, a sense of gratitude washing over her. It wasn't about having everything figured out, it wasn't about rushing to heal or putting on a perfect front, it was about finding those moments of peace and holding on to them, even when the world around her was unpredictable. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she was moving in the right direction. Slowly, but surely, she was finding her way back to herself. By the time the school year was winding down, Emma had come to understand something vital: healing wasn't linear. Some days felt like major victories, while others left her feeling like she was back at square one. But that was okay. She wasn't trying to be perfect anymore. She was just trying to be Emma. The art club had become her sanctuary. She spent hours after school immersed in sketching, painting, and even experimenting with digital art. Her creativity flowed in ways it never had before, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was creating something just for her. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It wasn't about validation. It was about expressing herself. However, Emma quickly realized that the battles she had faced, those that had been external and so very obvious, weren't the only ones she'd have to fight. The hardest fight was the one inside her own head. Some days, the weight of the past was almost too much to bear. The way people had whispered behind her back, the way Morgan's cruelty had affected not just her, but her friends as well, it was all still there, like a shadow that refused to dissipate. And then there were the reminders, the quiet moments when Emma found herself comparing her life to the lives of others. Caitlin, who had been her rock, seemed to breeze through everything. Tyler was always so confident, his laughter infectious. But Emma wasn't like them, and that's what made it so hard to avoid the feelings of inadequacy. Why couldn't she just be like them? Why couldn't she get past the fear of being judged? Why couldn't she just be comfortable in her own skin? One Thursday afternoon, as she was leaving art club, Emma was greeted by a familiar voice. It was Sarah. "Hey, Emma. Can we talk?" Sarah asked, hesitantly. Emma paused. It had been a few weeks since Sarah had apologized for her involvement with Morgan and the bullying. Since then, they'd exchanged polite smiles in the hallways, but they hadn't really spoken much. Emma still wasn't sure where things stood between them, and part of her wasn't sure she was ready for more. "Sure," Emma said, stepping aside to let Sarah join her on the sidewalk. "I know we haven't really talked much since, well, everything," Sarah began, her voice soft. "But I wanted to check in. I know I hurt you, and I know I can't undo what I did. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I've been thinking a lot about it, and I don't expect anything from you. She paused, her eyes glancing downward, "I just wanted you to know I really am sorry." Emma wasn't sure what to say. Part of her felt like she should still be angry, that she should reject the apology and keep her distance. But as she looked at Sarah, the sincerity in her eyes struck her. Emma wasn't the same person she had been when this all started. She wasn't the quiet twin anymore, the one who felt helpless in the face of others. She wasn't defined by what others had done to her. "I know," Emma finally replied, her voice steady but kind. "I know you are. It's complicated. I don't know if I'm ready to forget everything. But I do believe that people can change, Sarah. And I hope you've learned from this." Sarah's face softened. "I have. I really have. I understand if you need space, but I hope we can at least be civil with each other from now on. Maybe even be friends eventually." Emma took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "I think I'd like that too. But I need to take things one step at a time. And right now, I'm just trying to figure out who I am and what I want. It's not about holding on to the past, it's about moving forward." Sarah smiled, relief evident in her expression. "That's all I'm asking for. Just one step at a time." As the days passed, Emma allowed herself the time to process the conversation with Sarah. She wasn't sure if they would ever be close friends, but she realized that forgiving Sarah, and, in turn, forgiving herself, was a huge part of her healing. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. It was about accepting that people could change, that she could change, and that she didn't have to carry the weight of her past mistakes anymore. But even with that realization, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing. She still hadn't fully confronted the deeper layers of her own pain, the part of her that doubted her worth and her strength. And so, she decided to seek help. Not in the way she had initially thought she might, but in a way that felt right for her. The following week, Emma walked into the counselor's office for the first time. She had been putting it off for months, convinced that she should be able to handle everything on her own. But sitting in the counselor's waiting room, she realized that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of strength. It was an acknowledgement that she wanted to get better, that she wanted to move forward with her life, not just exist. As she sat across from Mrs. Thompson, the school counselor, she felt her nerves ease slightly. Mrs. Thompson was kind and patient, her voice soothing. They spoke about everything, about the bullying, the fears Emma had, the changes she had made, and the challenges she still faced. "I know it feels like you've come a long way, Emma," Mrs. Thompson said gently, "but sometimes, we can't fully heal until we allow ourselves to feel the pain and confront it. You've been through so much, and it's okay to take your time." For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to be vulnerable. She cried as she spoke about the deep-seated fears she had, fears that weren't just about Morgan or the bullying, but about her own sense of worth. She had been afraid of never measuring up, of never being enough. Mrs. Thompson listened quietly, offering occasional words of encouragement. "You are enough, Emma. You've always been enough. But you have to learn to see it for yourself." The more Emma spoke with Mrs. Thompson, the more she began to understand that healing wasn't just about closing one chapter and moving on. It was about acknowledging the pain, the trauma, and the impact it had on her life, and then choosing to rise above it. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be setbacks along the way. But Emma was learning that healing was a journey, not a destination. She was stronger than she had ever given herself credit for, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to keep moving forward. The final days of school arrived quicker than Emma had anticipated. Summer was just around the corner, and with it, a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. It was as though she had been carrying a heavy load on her shoulders for far too long, and now, with the school year coming to an end, she could finally breathe a little easier. She had made it through the storm. It hadn't been easy, there had been moments of doubt, frustration, and fear, but she had learned to stand tall in the face of it all. Emma had found her voice, not just in the confrontation with Morgan, but in the way she now navigated her own heart. She was no longer afraid of her own strength. As the final bell of the year rang, signaling the end of classes, Emma felt a sense of relief. But there was also a twinge of sadness. The bond she had formed with her friends, Caitlin, Tyler, and even Sarah, had been forged in fire, and the thought of spending the summer apart from them left her with a sense of longing. But she knew it wasn't goodbye forever. She was ready to embrace the next chapter, one that was defined by self-empowerment and personal growth. That afternoon, as she walked to the school parking lot with Caitlin, she couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened since the first day of high school. It felt like a lifetime ago when she had been so unsure of herself, so afraid to stand out, so consumed by the judgment of others. She had come so far, and as the warm sun bathed her in light, she couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for everything she had learned. "You know, Emma," Caitlin said as they approached their cars, "I've watched you grow so much this year. You've handled everything with so much grace, and I'm really proud of you." Emma smiled softly, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I don't think I could have made it through without you, Caitlin. You've been my rock through all of this. And Tyler, too. Honestly, I don't know where I'd be without both of you." Caitlin nudged her with a playful grin. "Well, you've always had it in you, Emma. You just needed to realize it. And now you're unstoppable." Emma laughed, feeling a lightness in her chest. "I'm still figuring it out, but I feel different. I feel like I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be." The summer passed quickly, filled with lazy days and moments of introspection. Emma spent her mornings painting, her afternoons catching up with her friends, and her evenings reflecting on how far she had come. The memories of her past, of Morgan, of the bullying, of the pain, still lingered, but they no longer defined her. They were part of her story, but they weren't the whole story. Emma knew that she would continue to grow, to evolve, and to find new parts of herself that she hadn't yet discovered. The future wasn't a daunting unknown anymore. It was an opportunity to shape her life in a way that felt true to who she was. One day, as the summer days began to wind down, Emma received a text message from Sarah. It had been a few weeks since they last spoke, and Emma had to admit that a part of her had wondered if they would ever really be friends again. But when she saw Sarah's name pop up on her phone, she felt a mix of curiosity and warmth. "Hey Emma, I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to say I've been thinking about everything we talked about. I really admire how strong you've been, and I just wanted to thank you for giving me a second chance. I hope we can keep moving forward." Emma smiled as she read the message. She had come a long way since the days when the mere thought of facing Sarah again felt impossible. She had learned that forgiving wasn't just about letting go of the past, it was about freeing herself to live her life without carrying the weight of old wounds. She replied, "I'm glad we're talking again, Sarah. And I want you to know that I appreciate your apology. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm open to moving forward. One step at a time. Sarah's reply came quickly, that's all I can ask for. One step at a time. Emma put her phone down and gazed out at the setting sun, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. She was no longer the quiet twin who let the world dictate her worth. She had fought for her life, for her happiness, and for her future. She had found strength in vulnerability and power in forgiveness. As the school year loomed on the horizon, Emma was ready. She was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to face them with the same courage and resolve that had carried her through the darkest days. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew that she had everything she needed to face it, herself. The quiet twin was no more. In her place stood someone stronger, someone braver, and someone who was no longer afraid to shine. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?